Recording in progress.
All right, welcome everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order for the Corporation Township of Portsmouth, December 20th, 2023, our last meeting of 2023. I will start with roll call. Councillor Bailey.
Present.
Councillor Hurst. Present. Councillor Goida.
Present.
And Councillor Schools.
Present.
All right, this will begin our moment of reflection. That concludes our moment of reflection. This way, question, confirmation of the agenda, please.
That council approves the December 20th, 2023 agenda and addendum as circulated, and that council approves the additions to the agenda as follows. Consent item 6.1.5, questions received from council, seeking additional information, the responses provided by staff.
Yeah, move for that, please. Councillor Schools, Councillor Goida, questions or comments? Councillor Schools.
Yes, the report dealing with the internet, I understand where, Glenn James is going to be here around noon. I was wondering if we can move that to around noon after the, camera session.
Council head nods, you're comfortable with that, of course, yep. You accommodate that, Councillor Schools. Okay, anything further? All in favor? That's carried. Do we have any disclosure of pecuniary interest today? Well, Councillor Schools?
Well, she's first.
No, you're first.
Okay, it's to do with the, report from, Sarah Wilhelm and Aldo. Okay, item 10.1, presentation for Aldo Salas, Director of Planning Development, Sarah Wilhelm, Manager of Population Planning, County of Wellington, regarding the RSEDASA scope of work. I live on Sidewalk 20 North. I have previously declared that I have pecuniary interest in a proposed rezoning of a property in Sidewalk 20 North. The study area for the regional significant economic development study as currently structured includes all properties on each side of Sidewalk 20 from 1 to 34 to Forstel. This further requires me to declare pecuniary interest as any development will have an impact on the value of my property. Unless the study area is changed, I cannot accordingly participate in discussions or decisions regarding the study.
Councillor Schools? Councillor Goida?
Mine is item 10.2, that this is the compliance assessment reports, and that is due to a family member operating gravel pit.
Right, thank you. Any other members have all right. Next, we're on to the consent agenda. This way, folks.
That the consent agenda items listed for the December 20th, 2023 council meeting be received for information.
You move with that, please. Councillor Bailey, second by Councillor Hurst. Any items to be pulled out? I'm supposed to.
6.10, municipality Gray Highlands resolution regarding Enbridge Gas.
Any other ones, councillors? No. Okay, we'll receive the remainder of those. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, 6.10. Sorry, Mr. Councillor Schools.
Yes, I was wondering if our CEO can give an update with respect to consumers gas doing likewise coming to our council meeting to discuss washable service expansion.
Certainly. So through Mr. Chair, we did receive correspondence from Enbridge Gas just earlier this year. They are looking to renew their franchise agreement with the township. It's done, I believe, every 20 years. So we are going to be engaging with Enbridge to see if there's a representative that could attend an upcoming meeting in January or February and have discussions about expansion at the same time that we consider the franchise agreement.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And further on that. So we need a separate resolution to receive that?
Yeah.
So we're just gonna need a mover to second to receive that one item. Councillor Schools, second by Councillor Bailey, all in favor? That is carried. Next, we have a public meeting. We hosted on January 17th, 2024, public information meeting held at 7404 Wellington Road 34 in person and by electronic participation through Zoom regarding the following matter: 2024 proposed budget public information. Councillor Bailey?
So what time is that?
Usually it's 7 p.m. Is that correct, Miss? I guess you're the boss.
Yeah, 7 p.m.
7 p.m. keep that date in mind if we have discussions later about this doing on the same day.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Get my. All right, of course, how much time do we have for? We have 20 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, can I just discuss one item relating to that budget information?
Absolutely.
I was wondering if staff in the presentation can also include the county numbers and then what the blended rate would be for us as well.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to defer to the Director of Finance on that matter.
Yes, I believe we have incorporated the county's numbers in that report, so we will work with the county to obtain their numbers.
You're likely aware, Mrs. Sam, I believe the OSIP funding for the county changed. So I don't know if you have the most up-to-date number, but if you do, that's great, but just keep that in mind. I saw an article in the paper about the county OSIP funding being reduced by 500K, so that'll drive up the, as you know, county proposed budget. Okay. Annual index, do we have time for that? Yeah, all right, we'll go to 9.2.1, and that's Mrs. Sand.
Sorry, Council. I'm just having a computer issue. One moment.
I'm trying to move fast, I apologize, but.
So this is our typical annual indexing of development charges report in accordance with the legislation, the Development Charges Act. And the indexing is within the report, the indexing that's being recommended, and I would welcome any questions from council.
Quick question, resolution for that one?
The report FIN 2023-035 entitled Annual Indexing of Development Charges be received, and that the index development charge rate outlined in Schedule B to the report be approved.
Then move for that, please, Councilor Hurst, and Councilor Swillis, questions or comments for the director? No, all in favor? That one's carried. All right, next on our agenda is 9.2.2, the pre-audit communication. Ms. Whitebox, do we have someone here to receive that information?
Sorry, I can
This is
speak to it if there are any questions from council. It's just a typical report provided by our auditors, just with the materiality for the audit and the work that they will be conducting. There are no material changes from previous years, and so it's just provided for council's information.
Excellent. Your resolution, please.
The council received the Township of Coast Lynch pre-audit communication for information.
Yeah, mover, please, Councilor Bailey, second by Councilor Hurst. Questions or comments? Councilor Bailey?
Just a general question. I noticed that there was communication to management before it came to council, so I'm just wondering if there were any questions or concerns or anything that came up in that communication.
No, there have been no concerns from the auditors related to their management inquiries to date. So they have started commencing some work, their interim audit work, and there have been no concerns related to staff as of right now. And there typically aren't any concerns, so
Yeah.
hopefully that's the case this year.
No. Councilor Hurst?
Just one point of clarity, how long has RLB been the external auditors on behalf of the township?
So we did go through an RFP, I believe in the last couple of years. So RLB was our auditor when I first commenced with the township in 2013. Then we had an RFP process, and BDO was our auditor based on that RFP process for several years. Then we did do a joint RFP process with our lower tier municipalities, Centre Wellington. And through that process, RLB was hired as our auditor. So we have had a couple RFPs related to audit services in the last few years.
Great, thank you. I appreciate just the historical context of how long they've had a working relationship with the township. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions? All in favor? It's carried. All right, next one is 9.3.1. I believe that's this White Box.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this report outlines the proposed private well interference complaints resolution agreement with Blue Triton Canada Water Holdings. So this is a report outlining seeking direction from council to enter into an agreement related to how to resolve any complaints that are received around well interference. This was originally initiated in 2019 and sort of paused at that time. And so we were working with Blue Triton to bring this back to council for consideration. It is a requirement of their permit to take water to have a document in place. So the agreement that's attached to this report has been reviewed by township staff and is up to date with our best practices. And we did work with Blue Triton, who's also in agreement with the way the draft agreement is worded.
Excellent. Do a resolution, please.
That report ADM 2023-071 entitled Private Well Interference Complaints Resolution Agreement with Blue Triton be received, and the council gives 3 readings to bylaw 2023-056, being a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the necessary documents in order to enter into a private well interference complaint resolution agreement with Blue Triton Canada Water Holdings Incorporated.
Excellent. Could we move that, please? Councilor Hurst, second by Councilor Bailey. All right, any questions or comments? Councilor Bailey?
Just a question that came out of your summary there. So they needed this document to get their permit to take water permit?
So through Mr. Chair, there is a requirement in their permit to take water that they have, it doesn't necessarily need to be an agreement, but they need to have a plan in place to deal with it.
So just a question, is there a dedicated area for property owners to qualify for this complaint process, or is it just kind of open?
So through Mr. Chair, there is a sort of zone that's been established, and I believe it was based on using information through the city of Guelph's work on through their water plans. So there is an area that's identified.
Can we get that mapping for it, or is it somewhere we can access that?
So through Mr. Chair, I do believe it's posted on Blue Triton's website, but we can certainly append it to this agreement as a schedule.
Great, that'd be good, thanks.
My experience with working with Blue Triton, Councilor Bailey, I've had residents contact me with well concerns, and they generally investigate any well. Even remember we had the jet fuel spill. They were, there's obvious reasons why they would want to investigate that. But I would encourage residents that even if they're outside of that zone, to at least make contact with Blue Triton. You might be surprised if they investigate your concerns. So, okay. Any other questions?
Yeah, I was just wondering if, in terms of the well protection committee, it talks about one member appointed by the township, and then it also says that all members should, to the extent reasonably possible, have a strong technical understanding of hydrogeology. So I'm just wondering if, will this be an actual staff person, or would we use someone like Hardin Environmental to be our representative in the committee?
So through Mr. Chair, I believe it was discussed in the past to have our hydrogeologist. There will be a cost associated with that. But we can discuss further in the new year, once we sort of reach out to the MDCP and the GRCA and figure out what that membership will look like.
And then I guess that was my follow-up question, would be the cost and whether any of that would be recoverable, or Blue Triton would consider making that cost recoverable.
So through Mr. Chair, we can have those discussions once the composition of that committee is determined. Yeah.
Any further? Okay, I didn't move her second, right?
We do.
Okay, all in favor? That was carried. All right, 9.3.2. And that's Robertson.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an annual report seeking council's endorsement of the health and safety policy and the harassment, violence, and workplace policy. Both of these policies were reviewed by the corporate joint health and safety committee and endorsed as presented. I'm not answering question.
Thank you. Resolution.
The report ADM 2023-074 regarding the health and safety policy and the harassment and violence in the workplace policy annual review be received. And that council endorse the health and safety policy and the harassment and violence in the workplace policy attached to this report as Schedule A and Schedule B respectively.
All right, and move that, please, Councilor Scholl, second by Councilor Bailey.
Yep.
Questions or comments? Mr. Bailey?
Yeah, I guess just a little comment, if it's something that's done annually and there's little changes in it, is there a way to kind of flag that for us, just so we're aware of what the changes are? Cause I don't know if this is different from,
Through you, Mr. Chair, if there have been changes, we would have incorporated them into the report, but there it's just as presented.
great, thanks.
Any further questions or comments? Councilor Hurst?
Just, yeah, just to piggyback on Councilor Bailey, I think what would be helpful for me would be, and I think I saw it, there was a date, I think it was stamped like 2022. If it's a formal health and safety policy, it should have somewhere in it, last reviewed or last updated, a particular date. Is it like right on it? I just see the ones that we do on the private sector, like that's a requirement we have, so maybe just a suggestion. And the other one would be has there been any external technical review of both the health and safety policy and protocols, just from an external source to say, hey, I'm a technical consultant or what have you, to say this meets the requirements as a third-party assessment? Just more a question.
So through you, Mr. Chair, yes, there has been a review to ensure that it meets all the various provincial standards. That's been done externally as well as internally through our HR.
That's good, thank you.
All right, all in favor? That one's carried as well. All right, now we're on to 9.3.3.
So yes, Chair, this is a report to request a noise exemption for the Mini Lakes Condo Corp. to use a scare gun to scare away geese as outlined in the report. Council has seen this report in the past and staff have no concerns with this request.
It's a little bit longer. The council received report ADM 2023-075, application for noise exemption for Wellington Common Elements Condo Corp 214, known as Mini Lakes. The council authorized an exemption under section 4, prohibitions by time and place in schedule 2 of the township's noise bylaw 5001-05 to permit the use of a scare gun to scare away geese at the Mini Lakes Resident Association during the period of March 25th, 2024 to May 31st, 2024, August 1st, 2024 to December 31st, 2024, January 1st, 2025 to May 31st, 2025, August 1st, 2025 to December 31st, 2025, January 1st, 2026 to May 31st, 2026, August 1st, 2026 to December 31st, 2026, all between the hours of 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. And that the exemption be approved for the time period indicated pending that the township does not receive any complaint. And that the migratory bird damage and danger permit holder be directed to notify the Ontario Provincial Police of the noise exemption.
Mover, please. Councilor Goyette, second by Councilor Spillis. Questions or comments?
I have one question. Sorry. Did you have a question?
Just, has there been any previous complaints in prior authorizations?
So through Mr. Chair, not that staff have been made aware of. Yeah.
Ms. Goyette?
Yeah, I was just wondering, so we've seen this same thing come through council a number of times. I'm just wondering, is this something that has to come through council? Or is this something that can be delegated to staff?
So certainly, this specific noise exemption could be delegated to staff. They do require it every 2 years in line with their permit. So at the direction of council, we can make note of that. If that's what council authorizes.
I would have any problem with that, especially given that there's no complaints or concerns.
Yeah, I don't have problems slugging the authority, but if we start receiving complaints, then it come before council. So thoughts on that, Councilor Bailey?
Yeah, no, that's reasonable.
Councilor Hurst?
You good?
No, you're good. I'm very much this, yeah.
So I've just added that council delegate the authority to approve the noise exemption for Wellington Common Elements Condo Corp 214 Mini Lakes on a go-forward basis, subject to no complaints being received.
And realistically, there's no damage being done by the birds. It's just a mess. Like it's the mess that they're trying to prevent. Is that
I believe,
accurate?
I believe so.
Well, I think that Canada geese are very protective when they have nests, so they become aggressive and yeah, it's a nuisance idea that they're trying to do. Okay, okay. It's carried. Did you say all those are coming in person, or are they in? We're gonna leave the high 9.3.4 till after the closed session. So go on to 9.3.5 unless they're here.
Just check to see. If they're not sure if they come in or if they're waiting.
On the protocol. Okay. All right, carry on. Council agrees to 9.3.4 to after the close, we'll go 9.3.5 for the communication protocol.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this is a report that's being brought back to council as directed, given that the township terminated its agreement with Crins earlier in the year. So this report outlines the proposed radio communication tower and antenna protocol for the township. So as noted in the previous direction, the township is looking to establish its own protocol as an alternative to using the ISED default protocol. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Read the resolution, please.
That report ADM 2023-077 entitled Radio Communication Tower and Antenna Protocol be received, and that council approve the radio communication tower and antenna protocol either as presented or amended.
Will you move that, please? Councilor Willis, Councilor Hurst. All right, questions, comments, Councilor Bailey?
Thank you.
Peter is that.
Mine's stuck on mute.
No.
I guess, again, a general question. I just wondered how, if staff's comfortable with the protocol. It does look like it was created using set requirements. So there's sort of a standard there that's been, set. And I guess I'm just looking for staff's comment on the protocol.
So through you, Mr. Chair, this protocol, staff drafted it in consultation with the Township of Guelph Ramasa. So they recently also terminated their agreement with Crins, and they put this in place. So staff started with that protocol and amended it for the township's purposes. We also reached out to a consultant from Clear Cable who had assisted us with our with the task in the past, who also was supportive of the protocol, made a few minor amendments to it. But in general, township staff are in full support of and are able to sort of manage applications using this protocol going forward.
Okay, and then so actually implementing the protocol, it mentioned having access to outside resources, and that's available.
So through Mr. Chair, we will amend the pre-consultation bylaw to include these applications, and we will be able to use a firm or one of many consulting firms that we're aware of to help us in reviewing these applications.
That's
Good. Councilor Hurst?
Yeah, maybe just a couple comments. Great to see the collaboration with Guelph Hermosa, just to kind of share knowledge and keep costs down. I think that's important and I think should be noted. Maybe my suggestion would be is after staff have gone through this one time, maybe just a reassessment of the protocol to gap assess it and say, hey, here's what worked, here's what didn't, here are maybe some of our blind spots. And my third piece would be based on that assessment at some point in the future after you've gone through this to look to further collaboration opportunities, whether it's using external consultants or just shared knowledge with other municipalities. And I think Guelph Hermosa is a good example of that. I think it just why recreate the wheel if it's already being utilized by another municipality that we have a good working relationship with. So I think it keeps the cost down and the service gets provided. So I think just comments more than anything. Well done.
That's good.
Yeah, no, I have this well-written report. I don't have any questions.
I echo sentiments for previous councils that this is a well done report. I've seen other protocols and not as thorough or exhaustive as this one is, and it'd be great to have a roster of specialists to help you with the process.
Good, move your seconder. Good, it's all in favor? All right, that's carried. Now we will move on to correspondence, item 10.1, I'll ask Ms. Wall and Mr. Salas to come down to the table. Good morning.
Good morning.
Nice to see both of you.
Good.
Thank you. We're just gonna put your report up there. Something you guys can begin.
All right, shall we?
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Happy to be here today to give you a brief overview of the scope of work for the study formerly known as the RCEDA. So we'll step into this draft scope of work. I'll just briefly go through each section in the document, and this document became a little bit longer than I originally intended, but I feel like maybe this will be a helpful piece of information that we can put on the website to help people understand generally what the study is going to be about. So really the main reason for this document is to make sure that we're generally all on the same page. And then we'll use this as, in large part, the way it's written to be inserted into the terms of reference for the study, and then we can continue from there to the hiring process. And hopefully this will just, again, help us make sure that we just have that shared understanding of what we'll be doing. I won't speak to the policy framework in any detail other than to say that it's ever evolving, and we'll continue monitoring every day what's happening and what's changing and what isn't. And the main thing here is just to point out some of the local policies that are specific to areas within Puslinch and that should be looked at as part of the study. And of course, this is being undertaken as part of the rural phase 3B of the municipal comprehensive review. Puslinch design guidelines. This has kind of been built in a little bit, kind of baked into the study a bit, so that we can use that good work as, again, a jumping off point, and hopefully expand the design guidelines and be able to include new areas that might be designated, and maybe have some different approaches for dealing with you know, the streetscape and rural character, things like that. The study name, I thought it was worth explaining a little bit. Again, Puslinch by Design is a bit of a tagline meant to capture the fact that this study will address design elements, which isn't necessarily always the case in a study like this. So I think it's a good add-on. And then the employment land study is just a more concise way of stating what this really is about. It's still the big, long RCEDA, but this way I think it's a little easier for all of us to understand and communicate what this is. So, and I think it's important to, this has been woven throughout the document that, you know, if Puslinch needs a new industrial designation, then now would be the time to do that. So to have a prestige industrial and a more general industrial type designation. And then in terms of the study boundary, there are a couple of refinements, and you know, things have been complicated recently with the provincial government changing their mind about the modifications that they made to OPA 119. That did affect things in Puslinch, and those greenbelt removals look like they're going to stand. The province wanted that taken out and, but we've shown the addition of the, Danby lands. And then also the addition of the Farhi property. The Farhi property is already designated for development, but it just wasn't captured and, it seemed to make sense to include it in the study. And I'll continue on. Purpose of the study is primarily to look at picking up that need for additional employment land that was identified through our consultants' work on the municipal comprehensive review. So mainly industrial, but also some associated commercial uses as well. We think we should see a preferred land use concept coming out of this, which would provide a breakdown of where the different land uses should go. And then a local development framework. So again, the land use designations, policies, and design guidance for employment lands. And then also later, I think I've noted too, that I think it would be helpful for the consultants to also advise what types of studies should be done at the time of development as well. 3 goals that we've, just to kind of, hang on the bones of the study. We wanted to make sure that this was a made in Plislinge approach. This was something a point that was driven home to me when we prepared the Plislinge design guidelines many years ago. Council didn't want to see other places. They wanted to see examples from the county and from within Plislinge. So I think it's important. I know that you've had a lot of logistics facilities and just kind of taking the temperature and seeing what's in the development pipeline, what's on the ground now, and then thinking forward into the future about what you'd like to see happen. And also, of course, a range of parcel sizes and access. I think the second goal about Highway 6 and 401 is probably quite obvious to all of council, but it's nice to kind of set that out and make it clear that that's a very important element that really is key and central to the study. And then back to the design, the high quality and sustainable design. And this sets out some of the areas that would be important to doing that work. And then we have within the policy area, the different areas of the technical areas of focus that should be addressed. And so again, we put a bit more meat on the bones around that so that it sets out generally the types of things that each area should cover off. I did discuss the transportation component with Pasquale Costanza from our roads department. I've been in close discussions with our Ken DeHart at the county, and then also economic development as well. So I'm not going to dive into these in any detail. I think it's pretty clearly set out. And then the phasing I put in just to see if you were all paying attention to the little error there. There will be 6 phases. And I have 5. So that's how that's generally planned out. And of course, once consultants are retained, we can fine tune and talk about whether this is the best way to do it. And then consultation, I thought it was worthwhile to just set out some of the areas, key stakeholders, just so that, again, we're all on the same page. Looking toward the end of 2024 as a project timeline, and we'll do our best, but I guess we'll see as things roll out how that goes. And then the reference documents are listed here as well, just to make sure if there's anything we've missed that you've done locally or at the county or the province that should be added, just let us know. So that's my quick review, and happy to talk about this further.
Thank you. Sure. You need to read the resolution first, or? And you want to add, Aldo?
I didn't know Sarah was gonna jump right in, so I was just gonna say, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here.
I live in the shadow of someone like also. I know exactly how it is.
Sorry, I'm wound up and I go.
No, just that we're pleased to be here. As you know, Sarah Poster and I have spent, been invited to this room many times over the course of the years, decades for me, so happy to be here, and we're excited about the study. I think it's a great initiative. So we look forward to helping the township move forward.
So, thank you. Okay.
The correspondence item 10.1 regarding the RCDA scope of work be received, and the council approved the RCDA scope of work either as presented or amended. And the council authorized staff to work with the County of Wellington to issue a request for proposal as soon as practical in the new year.
Thank you. You're gonna move to that, please, Ms. Boyda. Councilor Bailey. Thank you. All right, questions and comments, Councilor Bailey?
I have some questions, but I think I'm gonna do some of the detail ones offline, just understanding how some of this works, but, we mentioned in there, having a diverse employment area. And I'm just kind of curious how we design for that. So the one comment I had was when considering the different types of industry, I'd like us to think about a cumulative effect of the current industry that we have and maybe trying to diverge from that. And I don't know how you plan for that.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's what's written there was meant to capture that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so we would have the consultants kind of take stock of what's already there, what you have under review. And then look at the land use designations and figure out if there are some areas that would, like I said, we can look at having more than one designation for industrial, rural industrial. We could split it like it's typical to have a prestige industrial, which might, be along highway frontage and not have, outdoor storage, outdoor parking of trucks or things like that. So that's what we would task the consultants with.
I hadn't heard that term before, so it's
Okay.
interesting to read that in there. I'm gonna skip that question. In it, you mentioned buffering, in one of the goals, I think, in there. How does buffering look like? Does it have to be, based on an existing lot, or can lot lines be adjusted? Or how do we talk about buffering and kind of give our sort of thoughts and goals on what that would look like?
Sure. These are things that are rolled out through the study. Part of it was based on, we're talking about new development areas. Whether we have specific areas we want to mitigate against, some of the buffering techniques might be different in those cases. It really depends on the circumstances, but these are things that we're going to ask the consultants. I know the public will likely ask the consultants, how do we deal with mitigating potential impacts between land uses? We can fine tune the terms of reference a little bit better to address the concern about buffering. And I wanted to get back to your previous question, if I can, Your Worship, about some of the land uses and how do we control, or how do we have a say in terms of what we might see coming. And part of it is the market. Sometimes we can't really control the market, but we can control, create an environment where we attract a certain element of industry as opposed to others. And that's achieved through design, through policy that we might incorporate, and then ultimately through zoning as well. So there are tools, and these are things we're going to ask the consultants to help us with. Including things like buffering, protection of natural areas, those kinds of details.
Good. You touched on another question, mine. Just the last thing is, I didn't see any mention of green planning. And again, maybe this is just in, you know, how we become desirable or, attract people, but, you know, maybe somewhere in the study, we can be showing how we can encourage being green.
There is a reference, and it is a bit vague. On page 5 of the document where we talk about environmental sustainability and sustainable design. Just right
At the bottom,
here,
starting at the bottom of page.
Yeah.
page 5.
So
I don't know what that looks like, you know, but it would be nice to just emphasize that moving forward, that would be a good focus.
Councilor Hurst?
Yeah, thank you. In a recall at a prior meeting, I'd requested that the scope of study be brought forward, so I appreciate the time and effort that you put into working through this. I think for me, it gives me a greater degree of clarity of actually what the scope of work looks like and what's in and what's out. And I think, you know, from my perspective, it's a study, provides knowledge and insight so that appropriate planning decisions can get made thereafter, type of thing. So I think that's important. I'm glad that you brought up the public consultation process. I think this is really important, and I think even my request of you and staff would be is, let's make sure that that's synced in the right process. It's, you know, it's hard to do a consultation if there's nothing to consult on, but you don't want to have it so far down the road that, you know, the work's 90% done, type of thing. And I think it's really important, and truly, like, I look at the you know, that concession forecourt, there's a lot of residents that live right along there, and we've heard this in prior public consultations, and I think it's important that their, you know, their vision of that community is well heard. I think the other one, and he just alluded to it in Councillor Bailey's comments, around environmental impacts, water impacts, and just the whole, you know, sustainable environmental ecosystems and how they fit within the community, but also within a need to drive commercial innovation. And I'd really encourage that to be a robust part of the study, if that makes sense. I think moving to the future, we need to be quite cognizant of that. And I think Council Bailey also touched on, you know, the impact analysis. And I guess I look at this as you know, you can do economic studies and what the future looks like, but we also need to take into consideration what we have now and what the impacts of any future development may be on current pieces. And then the last one, and I'll stop here, is infrastructure needs assessments. And I kind of look at this, if we look at, say, for instance, what the city of Guelph may have as part of their study profile, you know, we have very different infrastructure within the township, and I think that needs to be very well thought out and articulated in the sense of, you know, as a prime example, septic system management is a prime from my standpoint. You know, it's, you know, I don't want to sound flippant, but if there's a pre-existing septic system within the city of Guelph, that's a very different dialogue for any business looking to invest in the region, whereas within the township, that's a significant investment, but also it has economic and environmental impacts in the community. So I would just, I'd really want to see that type of thought in it. And I'll leave the last one as just, you know, from an agricultural standpoint, certainly this is my perspective. I hope other councillors in the mayor share this, but, you know, I'd be very sensitive that any development comes at the cost of agricultural land. I think you know, once it's gone, it never comes back, type of thing. So I think that's something that, and I saw it in here, so I don't want to sound negative to that, and I just want to call that out. So overall, I think, you know, good job. I'm glad. I appreciate you guys taking the time and providing a detailed scope of work, and yeah, I look forward to it and I think, I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Rhoda.
Thank you. So I guess maybe I just want to preface my questions a little bit by saying, this study area is something completely different than anything we've ever looked at before, so it's kind of like unfamiliar territory. And as I've been reading through and thinking about this study, there's been a number of sort of questions and ideas sort of formulating. And I want to ask them, but I apologize if I'm a bit kind of all over the place, or if I'm maybe asking things that aren't applicable. But I think that given that this is sort of like a long-term plan, now's the time to be asking those questions. So if I'm too much in the weeds, forgive me, please just let me know and I'll move on. But the first thing I wanted to ask is to build on what Councilor Bailey had talked about. And it touches on both the transportation and the land use compatibility piece. And looking particularly at the block that runs parallel to the Hanlon Side Road 20 concession for that piece there. Once that concession for access is closed with the Highway 6 improvements, that block is going to become somewhat landlocked. So I'm assuming as part of this study that there'll be an in-depth look at what the access to that block will be. Is that correct? Yes. Okay.
Would there not be a wholesome transportation review of the study? Which would it be inclusive of lands that may be landlocked or access?
Yeah,
Absolutely.
so I guess where I'm going with that is that may suggest that maybe there's a service road needed there, maybe it's not, but as one of the outcomes of that study, it would be great to see, especially in that block, some enhanced protections and buffers for the landowners who live alongside Road 20 and concession 4. And when I say enhanced buffers, I mean like something that goes beyond just burns, like something that's a more sort of substantial transition from rural to whatever is going to be there. And is that something that will be incorporated in there?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's why it's called Twist Lunch by Design, is literally to develop options and solutions that will meet the specific needs in those specific locations. Yeah.
So maybe I'll just interject quickly. Myself, and I forget who attended, but we had another meeting with MTO, their director of West operations changed again. So we had another meeting, we brought up the bypass, some concerns south of 401, but we also mentioned the concession 4 access. Because we kind of heard from MTO informally that would not be considered to remain open even southbound. And we had advocates for certain lands saying that they felt they could get that access, so there was a bit of back and forth. So in that meeting, I asked the MTO, I said, we needed in writing your opinion on, or your position on that access. And we received that a couple weeks ago, forwarded to Aldo and Sarah. And in that response, it spelled out why that access will be closed. So that will be incorporated into, so back to servicing that property using concession 4 southbound, as far as I'm concerned, from that letter is that. Oh, sorry, David.
Just to follow up, what Sarah said earlier about your concern is whether these are getting into the weeds. They are details, important details. Some of the response to these questions will come through recommendations from the consultants. Ultimately, council will have the opportunity we have to implement a policy document, and that's when we can get into the specifics geographically. Like in one area, you'll have more concern about compatibility than another area. And we can do those through the detailed policy implementation.
My follow-up to that was going to be through the building. So we talk about sort of like buffers, but is there opportunity to incorporate guidelines for building design? So that the buildings themselves also are able to contribute to providing some kind of both buffer and natural transition, or is design of the buildings a separate thing entirely?
So the building the design guidelines into the scope of work is meant to give the opportunity to look at, and it's got enhanced building design and like different options for that would definitely be an appropriate area that would be addressed through the study.
The second component is when it talks about, and this is coming from the growth plan and the policy framework in there, which is not necessarily entirely applicable because this is a different thing altogether, but it talks about encouraging municipalities to designate and preserve land as areas for manufacturing, warehousing, and logistics, but also appropriate associated uses and ancillary facilities. And I'm just wondering what it means when it's talking about appropriate associated uses and ancillary facilities.
Well, so sorry, you're reading from this.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't want to get too specific because I wanted to leave options for what commercial uses might be determined to be appropriate and where they might.
Okay,
go.
so that's where that was leading me. Does commercial get commercial spaces, retail spaces, office spaces also be incorporated into that as well?
Yeah, we typically haven't had a lot of demand for that, and I know some large municipalities do more planning around, office uses. But I think that the consultants, that's something that they'll be tasked with looking at, and they'll be able to look at it within the context of all the technical work that's happening.
And then what about recreational uses such as trails and even parks within that space? Is that something that gets looked at as well?
I think that's something that council needs to decide. I mean, that would, this isn't a recreational master plan.
Yeah.
It's about identifying employment land. But it doesn't mean that, transportation is one of the elements. The active transportation plan is one of the reference documents. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Trails as a component of transportation, but not so much as a recreation. But obviously, when you build infrastructure, it could be used by anyone.
Right.
But I don't think the focus is to develop a trail master plan or a trail.
Yeah.
I guess sort of, and that's what I mean. I may be totally off kilter with all of this, but I just, in my mind, I envision employment lands. My mind goes straight to industry and big warehouses, and that's not what we want it to look like. So I'm just trying to understand, as part of this study, how do we incorporate things like for instance, the block of land that runs behind the Plus Lunch Community Center, it goes all the way to Concession 7, that's within the study area. But there's future development lands across from this building, there's future development lands across from where Blue Triton is. There's Heritage Lake Estates on the opposite side, there's Slavinsky Park. So in my mind, I'm like, how can we incorporate connections to all of these communities throughout these employment lands? Something like, I'm thinking in the city of Guelph, from their business park, they have trails that run through it. Just kind of like a more, this may be totally out of the scope, but just sort of like a more complete vision of how everything is going to sort of play out and lay out once everything gets eventually developed. And maybe I'm making no sense at all.
I mean, we can add a reference to, I think your notion is of the connectivity of the employment lands with the rest of the community.
Yes.
Which is a very broad question, but we can put components of that in the terms of reference for the consultants to think about that. How do we create connectivity? Whether it's trails for access, bike access or whatever, or improved vehicle access to employment areas from residential areas, or the connection between employment and commercial areas for restaurants or other services that are tied to the employment. We can, that connectivity comment, we can make reference to that in terms of reference.
Thank you for narrowing all that down into number. That's all my question.
Okay. In terms of process, right now, we're gonna be going out for an RFP to do the study area. That's my understanding, right? Is there gonna be a consideration of phasing this, for a couple different reasons? I'll just go back to our zoning bylaw amendment when we first took office, members that came back. We had a component of the zoning bylaw that was relative to agriculture. It was appealed, which is fine, but then, you know, there was a plethora of things that weren't in dispute that couldn't be implemented due to the appeal around the agriculture. So I'm wondering, because this study area is so large, are we going to be asking the consultants if they can break it up? Is there any desire to do that? And yeah, so if we just set on that.
And just for clarification, when you say zones, you mean not zoning?
Correct,
Okay,
areas.
thank
Sorry.
you.
Yeah.
My brain can't help itself.
Right.
If you wanna speak to
We did, Sarah and I did talk about the notion of breaking up the study into components, and in the end determined that separating out the study or phasing the study isn't wouldn't be viable or as effective, because it's a complete geographic area that needs to be assessed. In order to develop something more strategic and comprehensive, it needs to be looked at holistically. There are implications if we break it up from a study perspective, from the consultant's perspective, because then if you do things partially, how do you do your public engagement? Do you do it separately? That's somewhat confusing for the public as well. It certainly would extend timelines and therefore extend costs. So in the end, it was set up as a comprehensive review, and our recommendation is that it be carried forward as a comprehensive review. We can certainly talk to the consultants that are retained to see how they view it. But I think that's the approach we would recommend. It's certainly the approach that we drafted the policy that was approved under OPA 119 that way.
That's fine. Speaking of design, a couple comments. One is the design around any roads that need to be constructed for us. If you drive through our current industrial area, if you go back, you have Nicholas Beaver Road behind Tim Hortons. The first part of it is relatively nice for an industrial area. Then you hang a left and it doesn't look like the surface of the moon, but it's not very aesthetically pleasing. And I feel that we get some new employment lanes on board, we can some design criteria that would be done a little more representative of our community. That one was designed back in, I don't know, the 90s, so maybe it was appropriate, but I think to our staff, the maintenance of these new roads would be, for me, would be a higher level, maybe if it's grass or maybe put low maintenance material on edges of the ditch so that they're just not overgrown weeds and, yeah. And also touching on what Councillor Goyda was referencing, I was thinking along the lines of designs for site specific, getting the weeds a little bit, but in employee residential spaces. The reality is if we have these lands and we attract businesses, there's not a lot of support around the facilities, say a Starbucks or whatever, wherever you like to go for your lunch. Those may not be there, so if employees want to go for a walk during their lunch break, if our prestige industrial, I don't know if it's possible, but through zoning, we have requirements for recreation space. I think those are my, oh, the other thing, statement I want to say is, actually, let me back up. And I know you're from the planning department, but I wonder if you could speak to the importance of employment lands to the county and to as a whole and the township. And the county is coming with a significant contribution monetarily and staff to this study, which speaks volumes to the importance of it. And I think it's good for the public to know that having employment lands come online reduces the burden of the residential taxpayer to the county and to the corporation for our operations, right? So if you could, a few words as to why this is important, and as you are an equal partner in this, which we truly appreciate here at this mission.
Yeah, your worship, if the treasurer would, he would say, if the treasurer was here, he would say this is very important to the overall economy of the county. All employment lands across the county are important to the county, both locally and regionally. And in particular here, because of the proximity to the 401 corridor. Yeah, so yes, to echo, yes, it's very important both locally and for the county. If I can, you had raised a comment about employment and employees in residential, and I wanted to make sure I understood. Are you referring to ancillary residential components of employment lands? Was that? No.
I thought what I was trying to say was that if the design of certain lots or specific sites within the study, once I know it's getting way down the road, but consider just recreational space, nothing to do with, I mean, the study will decide whether there's components of that area for residential, but well, even the DAMI presentation, they were, in some of their preliminary designs, they said they were gonna have walking paths and certain different things, so I thought that'd be a nice thing to incorporate into other areas of the study area if they get rezoned. Because we don't have the financial ability to build a sidewalk all the way to every new section of this employment area. So if they can do their own recreational activities within their own boundaries, then that's a little bit more advantageous to us. So
Yeah, okay,
that makes sense.
thank you for clarifying.
And if I may, if you'd like, I can add a paragraph to this document because I have content from earlier reports where I said how many how many of your businesses are in the top 20, and if you'd like, I can certainly have some additional content on that. It's helpful for the consultants too, so I don't mind.
I like the idea of the prestige industrial. The other old component of our industrial area is heavily based on logistics, and I'm not opposed to logistics. It's just that some of them are just a site trailer and then parking, whereas if our prestige industrial has large requirements for warehousing, something along those lines, and as well as the logistics component, then I feel that's more palatable to the township and the county. The reality is the building's taxable, the parking lot isn't as much, right? The outside storage for 20 years. I like the idea of the prestige industrial, and that's why I went down the road, unintended, about the, a little bit aesthetically pleasing design for the transportation network.
Sorry, just to add, the design guideline document was a pretty pretty progressive approach for a municipality of your size at that time. And I recall, there was more of an interest in a carrot versus a stick approach. And specifically, I think there was a focus on certain corridors where we would have the higher level of design, and maybe the thinking at that time was, if it's an internal roadway way back in an industrial area, maybe we don't care as much. But I think now we have this opportunity, and we can, I can see that there could be some updates to the design guidelines to achieve what you would be looking for now. So, yeah.
Okay. Anything further from council? Did you get the resolution? So it's not amended, we're taking notes and.
Presented and to move forward with the request for proposal.
Okay. Right. All in favor? Great. Thank you for coming down. Really appreciate it. Thank you. That's the same volume. Take 5 minutes. 30. All right, welcome back, everyone. I believe we're gonna skip to 9.3.6. I believe that's this white box.
Yes, so through you, Mr. Chair, this is a new report template that staff are bringing forward to update council on previous council direction and the status of the various items. So they're broken out in the chart, and then there's more detail throughout the report in respect to each item. And this report, the recommendation is to receive it for information, but we're happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, the mover for that, Councilor Spoulos and Councilor Bailey. All right, questions for Ms. Whitebox, Councilor Bailey.
Thank you. Yeah, I don't have any questions. I do like how you set this up. It's a really great summary. We're constantly directing staff to do things, and for me, this is just a really great summary of what's been happening and the updates. So I don't have any questions, but thanks for this report.
Councilor Hurst.
No questions. I echo Councilor Bailey's comments.
Yeah, I agree with the comments that already said. I guess I am thinking maybe that is staff looking for some direction for that, specifically for the Kerr Crescent stormwater management plan.
So through you, Mr. Chair, it's not identified in the report. However, staff did forward the Kerr Crescent correspondence to the county. The county, I believe, received it for information, so I don't believe there's any action coming from council and staff's request related to financial support with that stormwater management maintenance funding. Staff have begun investigating opportunities for cost recovery options related to new development and how that could, a strategy related to that. If there's any additional direction outside of that, staff are happy to take that away.
Yeah, I can add some. My understanding is that this was received at the Roads Committee for information, as the committee felt it was more appropriate to be handled by AF and HR at the county, because it would require a policy creation or change, which would put some monetary responsibility for industrial areas largely serviced, stormwater ponds largely serviced by industrial areas, which puts the county at a larger benefactor of those properties, responsible for the maintenance of these things, but that would be a policy. So essentially it was funded, and I'll maybe backtrack a little bit. That's why when I've asked that when we send things to the county, now we send it to the clerk, because this was one of the examples where, well, it services roads and stormwater, was sent it to the roads committee, and then it got punted. So my advice, I was thinking about this last night. Councillor Balmer is a representative of the county. He was at this meeting. I would maybe ask staff to, if they're comfortable with this, reach out to Councillor Balmer and have a discussion about a request from Fuslinch and whether it is creating a new policy around stormwater management. And ask for some guidance for that, and then, report back to council on the direction on approaching the county for a policy of that nature. Because then we need an ally up there, right? So I think that'd be the first step. Really?
So I did attend the meeting where this was presented, and the consensus seemed to be that if they were gonna act on something like this, it would need to be sort of a countywide initiative, so doing a policy. So I don't know whether also reaching out, if staff reach out to other member municipalities and see if there's any, I don't know, anything within their municipality that would be similar to this. I don't know what's out there. And then doing more of a collective, I don't know, a collective approach, and maybe going through Councilor Ballmer's the catalyst for that.
This way, please.
Oh, so through you, Mr. Chair, staff have, through their investigation, have reached out to, municipalities. There seems to be policies that exist, in bigger urban centers, but not specifically related to sort of, more rural. So we're still doing that investigation, and we'll continue, in order to, investigate if a policy could be developed that would be specific to the county or the township.
Maybe we can have also Mr. Fowler indicate the timelines that we're working with for this rehabilitation of this pond. Are we on borrowed time? Do we have some time? Because that's going to really dictate the timing around approaching the county. Mr. Fowler?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I indicated to you earlier, the urgency is not as dire as we first assumed. The pond is still functioning to its capabilities, but it has been identified within the next 2 to 3 years that serious consideration should be made to allocate funds to dredge and grub this identified storm pond.
I guess, Mr. Fowler, if we're asking staff to go back and communicate with other municipalities, there's likely 1 or 2 more stormwater management ponds that service the industrial area. One coming to mind is behind the old car store, Pioneer gas station. And is there not one back further? Let's see the road, whatever the road is at the back of the industrial area. There's not another one, so a total of maybe 3 ponds.
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct. The difference is with the other 2 storm ponds, they're not located to, we'll say, large gravel parking lot areas that tend to produce a lot of silt. The Kirk Crescent Storm Pond is situated right basically in the middle of about 6 properties, which, about 5 of them have gravel parking lots, which contribute to the runoff and the silt buildup.
Well, I guess in our discussions, if we base it on that the stormwater management pond services primarily industrial, then the formula for funding should just be around that regardless of location. We wouldn't ask the county to build a policy specifically for Kerr industrial. We're asking them to build a policy around stormwater management ponds that service industrial areas. Fair enough? Okay. So anyways, we have some time. This is probably appropriate to start those discussions now, because if it has to be a policy change, that could take likely a year at the county. So I think it's good timing. All right, Councilor Wilson?
Yeah, I just want to add, can we get a schedule on this thing? We heard from our director of works that he's got 2 or 3 years, and we should try to map it out that we hit the county in time for them to develop a policy to help us out.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we can send this correspondence off, and I still have it drafted to send it to County Councilor Ballmer at the county. So we can send that off before we go on holidays. Next year would probably be meetings with neighboring municipalities, as well as seeing how the county wants to tackle policy development. But I think we need to coordinate with the county a little bit better before we determine timelines, just because it would be their policy development.
No, I understand that, but I'm saying it's important that we have something formulated so that, our director work doesn't run out of time and I think it's all ours.
Instead of sending correspondence to Councillor Ballmer, should you, yourself, and we invite, or just set a meeting with Councillor Ballmer? I think that would be more of.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I have the draft motion that council directs staff to send correspondence to County Councillor Ballmer requesting a meeting to discuss options regarding cost recovery of swim maintenance facilities throughout the county through potential policy development. Sorry, SWM, stormwater management facility.
Yeah, that works, because I'd like to hear his opinion of the challenge we face on that policy. Or we send staff away to do a formal ask, right? So then we can kind of strategize on our approach.
I think the letter is very explicit that they're getting a lot of, stick from us. Because, and we have to pay the whole nickel on the, management of that fund. I think it's important.
I agree. I agree. We also just had a presentation where they're contributing to a study that was likely voluntary on their behalf, so I'm
No, but at the
just
same time, look at the
sensitive.
benefits.
I know.
So it's not as if, we're the only beneficiary, but there was, I could see the point.
I'm just trying to go in the cookie jar 2 different days, it's not the same day.
They have a big pocket.
They have a big cookie jar. Okay. I think we have a plan for it.
And through Mr. Chair, this report will come back to council, the update report. So to Councilor Floris's point of just keeping in a management on the timelines, we can bring back updates regarding this matter as well in council.
Right.
No, not really. I did find it very interesting to learn about these community safety zones. I think we all thought that community safety zones could only be where there's schools and things like that, so this was interesting to learn that that's not the case. But it sounds like from those questions that circulated that, the most appropriate sort of route is to first get the speed review done. And that's in 2025, is that what I'm thinking of?
Well, we're also waiting on the county to implement the electronic speed enforcement. These are all pieces of the puzzle that are up in the air, right? So, community safety zones on their own, no offense. A couple extra signs on the side of the road doesn't really change behavior. Community safety zones with electronic speed enforcement definitely changes behavior, trust me.
But knowing this now, we could put them on township roads, not necessarily through the county.
Right, but without the automated speed enforcement, I don't feel there's as much benefit, if any. So I'm hoping that, I know what's in place, this electronic speed enforcement is coming. You know, likely line up with the 2024-2025. I just don't want to get too far ahead, putting in safety zones everywhere
Yeah.
ahead of the enforcement, once we do enforcement, and then kind of pick away, but we're on the same page, I'm just a little slower. Maybe.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on this LAS. Mr. Mayor, we had a deputation from the police and the county with respect to policing. We made a motion that they consider purchasing speed monitoring equipment. Do you know if that's gone anywhere at the county level?
I believe the CAO took it as a takeaway, and they don't have committee meetings in December. It will likely show up on the January committee meetings for discussion. That's my assumption. I haven't had those conversations.
Or would you say that it's likely not a 2024 budget item, be a 2025 budget item?
Well, initially, when we had the conversation here, so, I felt there was quite a bit of support from the CAO. As everyone else, the budget is challenging at the county right now. And then we've just recently heard the OCIF funding has been reduced by 500,000 to the county. That's a half point. So with that part of the equation in now, it's just going to be more difficult. But how many cameras did we ask? Can we buy extra 5 or 7?
I recall.
I can't recall either, but my memory says they're in the thousands of dollars each,
Yeah.
not hundreds of thousands. So the impact on the budget is, especially in Canada, is minimal. So, you know, we'll advocate for it for the 24 budget year, but I guess that's the best we can do.
Okay, and the last thing is to do with the speed study that we're gonna take in 2024 and 2025. Is staff prioritizing what they're doing in terms of which roads in 2024 and 2025, or is that going to be part of a recommendation maybe from the consultant, the more busy routes first type of thing, and
So through Mr. Chair, it'll likely be part of the recommendation, once staff and the consultant have an opportunity to look at the scope of the work.
because that's sort of dovetail into getting this down, other than identifying the roads and whether or not Councilor Gillette said as well, we want to designate some of these roads as community safety. They are issues. Well,
Any further questions or comments? Okay, wait a second.
Yeah.
Okay, well, all in favor? That's carried. We are. Weird.
The vote here. Resolution to bring it into close. Okay. All right, so that council shall go into closed session under section 239 of the Municipal Act for the purpose of a confidential report providing advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and this is related to a regulatory bylaw review.
Okay, good mover, Councilor Hurst, second by Councilor Spillis, all in favor? It's carried.
Okay, so for all of our attendees and staff, we are going into closed session. You can leave the meeting and then rejoin when we come back into open. I just still see a couple folks still on the line here. I'll just give it another couple seconds.
Okay, welcome. Ms. Whitewash, you have a resolution coming closed.
The council moves into open session at 12:30 p.m.
You're gonna move for that, Councilor Goida, second by Councilor Spillis. All in favor? Carried.
And, sorry, I just have to receive the closed item. So that council receives the confidential report regarding advice that is subject to solicitor client privilege regarding communications necessary for that purpose, and is related to a regulatory bylaw review.
Again, Councilor Hurst moved this, second by Councilor Spillis, all in favor? Carried. Go under system and power and battery. And then bring some in there, some 70s. 1 second. This big, hey, yeah, that'll be the show. Hold on, row? Row the other way. Oh, no, I'm sorry, no, oh yeah, screen and sleep. Is under there. Sorry, so we're waiting for which.
It's just too much.
Under, yeah, system and power. All right, let's have you read the resolution.
It's quite lengthy.
Yes, all right.
Yep.
Here.
Okay, so that report ABM 2023-076 entitled High Speed Internet Initiative as amended, be received. And the council approved the public engagement initiatives and schedule as outlined in the report. And whereas the township and the Portsmouth High-Speed Initiative Committee remains concerned regarding a number of outstanding issues and has a number of questions as follows. Following are for Rogers. There are dashes on the lines on the map. We assume all of the road segments that the dashes appear will have fiber installed on them. The dashes include 3 green dashes near Foreland and red dashes along Gore Road. Please confirm these dashes indicate fiber coverage for the full road segments on which the dashes appear. Question 2 for Rogers, on County Road 46 between Aberfoyle and the northern border of Portsmouth, there is no planned fiber coverage either by Rogers or any other ISP. However, there is a business located on that stretch of road. 2 developments off County Road 46 and 2 side roads as well as Aberfoyle itself. Would Rogers entertain covering this road? The side road zone with the subdivision in Aberfoyle. Question 3 for Rogers, clarification is required whether the green lines are accurate as depicted, as some roads have fiber installed already by other ISPs, such as in Morriston, are already provided by Bell, south end of Portsmouth of Highway 6, or already provided by Frontenac and Sandy Shores near Portsmouth Lake. Question 4 for Rogers, in the email text from Rogers, there is a reference to 25 megabytes download, 5, I think it's megabytes or MPVS upload speed. We have always understood that the criteria for eligible versus ineligible areas to be 50-10. Is it Rogers' understanding that this criteria is actually based on 25 speeds? Question 5 for Rogers, is there a deadline for customers to sign up for Rogers service, or can they sign up anytime after the service is made available? Question 6 again for Rogers. We understand that there's no initial installation costs incurred by residents. Would there be installation cost to residents if they choose to sign up for service sometime after the initial rollout of the service? And there's 3 questions specifically for standard broadband. There's an inconsistency between the map schedule and previous committed work, which requires clarification. There's an understanding from standard broadband on the Facebook page that there are other areas proposed to be serviced but are not reflected in the map or schedule, such as Mill Creek. Question 3 for standard broadband, there is an overlap between work now proposed to be done by Rogers and work committed by Rogers, which means to be confirmed as to who will do the work. And therefore that council directs staff to request a meeting with Rogers and standard broadband and to include the Portsmouth High-Speed Initiative Committee in order to respond to the questions noted above and issues noted in order to establish a comprehensive public engagement plan.
You're gonna move for that, please. Councilor Spoulos, second Councilor Hurst, there's a typo, number 4, after the 5 megabits per second, it's MP.
MB,
Should
okay,
be MBPS.
sure.
Okay, moved and seconded, all right. Glenn James, welcome. Sorry, we're just trying to be a little efficient.
I appreciate that, that's fine.
Wait for you to attend, so go ahead.
No, I don't have a formal presentation, I just, I'm here in order to make sure that if you have questions about the coverage that Rogers is planning, or the coverage that Standard Broadband is planning, and where we are with those, and what their schedules might be, and where the deficiencies might be, then I'm here to discuss those things with you. So if there's questions that you have, you probably are curious about what Standard is doing and so forth. I spent some time on the phone with Tom Williams, who's the president of Standard, yesterday, and tried to clarify his plans. So I'm happy to share that information with you or answer your questions, or both.
Councilor Bailey.
Sure, thank you, thanks for coming. I do see a lot of your Facebook
Oh, good.
posts and everything,
Good,
so,
good.
which is good, because on the 2 maps I have looked up,
Yeah,
my property is not on it, yet something on your Facebook page actually showed that I was on the map.
yeah,
So
there's
that was good.
some of that happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess one question I have, maybe you can clarify, I understand the Rogers work being done is through through a grant.
Almost all of it, but not all of it.
Okay, so maybe I'll stop there then. So if all of it's not covered under grant, will that impact residents having to pay more than others?
It's a good question for Rogers. We need to answer, or we need to get answers for those questions. And that's why and you'll hear this as a recurring theme, we need to visit with Rogers, because the exchange of emails that we collectively have had with Rogers so far hasn't led to timely answers. So that's what I think we need to do.
Yeah.
We're able to do that with Standard Broadband. So we assume that Rogers will likely extend the same sort of financial terms to their non-grant customers as they would to their grant customers. That hasn't been the experience with standard broadband. You're probably curious about that.
This
So,
might-
so, Standard has been charging households $7.50. And that's a one-time charge. And then it's, you know, it's $100 for their base level service. It is assumed that Rogers won't be charging anything, at least not initially, and that was, you know, in reference to one of the questions that I just heard that we're posing to Rogers, that's kind of relevant. Like, we want to know whether or not the service is going to be free install upfront and forever, or whether that's simply something in the short term, and then they'll change it going forward. And that will make a difference for how this is communicated to the community. So if someone realizes that it's cheaper to get it now than it might be later on, maybe they would make that decision. It's about empowering people, I think, to make the right decisions for themselves.
So speaking, getting it out to the public, and this is more for staff, but I noticed that in the proposal for engagement, there's nothing for in print. And is that just for cost reduction or?
So through you, Mr. Chair,
I didn't think I saw.
there's a few initiatives that would be in print. I believe we're including it in the tax insert, which will go household to household, the community guide to be print, as well as we heard feedback from the youth committee around posting to local boards in print. So bulletin boards throughout the township there, the youth committee had made some suggestions around that, so we've included that as well.
I guess I just meant like newsprint, so not in the Wellington Advertiser. Any suggestion to do it in the paper?
So through Mr. Chair, we had suggest sort of initiatives that were already budgeted for to take advantage of, but if that's the direction of council, we could include that. There would just be the cost associated with a minor cost associated with the Wellington advertising.
Maybe there's a bit of irony in that, but making sure it's in the newspaper, but you know, maybe if you're not having great internet, you might need to read about it in the paper. I think newspapers, pretty effective, you know, for most people. So I might suggest that. I don't know what the cost would be to put it in the Advertiser. Maybe that's something council can talk about. And this is way out of my realm, but there was a question when I was chatting with other people in the community. The question came up about, is it the same infrastructure that they're putting in? Is there opportunity for shared usage? Just questions around the actual infrastructure that's going in.
So I'll try to talk about that in terms of some of the questions that we've gotten as well. And some people are saying, well, I'm getting Rogers fiber, so can I sign up with Bell?
Yeah. So,
Or can I, if I'm getting standard broadband, can I sign up with Rogers? There are restrictions that the companies are placing on these things. So I know that there's been a CRTC decision about ensuring that Bell and I believe TELUS opens up their infrastructure to enable other players to sell their services through Bell infrastructure. That's kind of an outlier. That's a one-off. It doesn't work in reverse. And in our situation here locally, I think what you'll find is that you can't buy other services through Rogers fiber, and you can't buy other ISP services through standard broadband fiber. You can't do both. There are small pockets in the township with Bell fiber, and in theory, people with that fiber may be able to buy other services. But whether it includes standard broadband and Rogers, we don't know that.
that's all. Thanks for all the work you do with the committee, though.
Thank you. It's you know, it's something that I'll make sure we pass to the group, because it's not just me and John.
Just a comment, I would echo Councillor Bailey's observations. I think the information that I gleaned from the social media page is awesome and very timely, and I support all the recommendations here, and just have the patience of a saint navigating through this process, so it doesn't go unnoticed.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think just my perspective is trying to make sure that the townships is supportive of your endeavors as we can be, and I appreciate you coming and providing updates. That's it.
Ms. Wood?
Yeah, just to echo the comments already, thank you so much for all of your work and dedication that you put into this. I think the end result will be that hopefully we get all of these questions answered, and thank you for advocating for that on the town's behalf. And thank you to you two and the whole committee. Any of the questions that I have are already within that resolution, but the one thing that I'm curious about is the Rogers map has, I'm assuming when I look at the map that they've provided, everything in red is work that they've committed to do that is partially, or that is grant funded.
Yes.
And but then the areas that they've marked in green are areas that are not grant funded, that they said that they're gonna do anyway. Is that correct?
You're right. That's correct. And that's one of the things that we feel we need to confirm with them. Because some of those areas are, and you're referring to this map here I have in my hand, some of these areas in green that they have, that they say they're going to do even outside of the funding arrangement that they have. Some of that stuff is overbuilt. I know that there have been part of questions from the mayor about this, and we don't know whether Rogers is familiar with the fact that this would be overbuilt. We don't know whether these plans that they have would be a function of their operating requirements, or that their current infrastructure in those places is out of date and is something that needs to be replaced. We know that those places have current Rogers customers. So we don't know whether they want to maintain those or whether they want to expand it. And whether or not they know that Standard Broadband has already built some infrastructure or is planning to build infrastructure in those places. So those are the kinds of things that would be handy to have discussions on.
So my follow-up question was gonna be, do you think there's risk if the cost gets too high that they may not follow through on that commitment? And I think what I'm hearing is.
It's a good
No,
question.
Because you don't know
It's
what
just,
they already
yeah,
know.
we just don't know that. But I think we should also talk about things from another angle here, and that is that Standard Broadband is looking at this and going, and because they're aware of this map. And so they're going, we had planned on doing this work, or we already have done work in these areas. So, they have a different kind of arrangement. They're a smaller outfit. I can't speak to how they're financed, but usually companies like this have external sources of finance, and the people that deliver that money are interested in proper returns. And if they see areas where companies like Standard Broadband are potentially part of an overbuild scenario, they're not happy. And so they need to make good decisions about how they invest. So when they see the plan that Rogers has to put infrastructure on those green roads, then they become concerned. And so we need some clarification on Rogers. Again, are they aware of the infrastructure in the ground or soon to be in the ground? And are there other operational reasons why they need to do this? Yeah, so I understand your questions, and it's something that is for the committee that we've been thinking about a lot, and it did expected surprises when we saw those green roads on the Rogers Plan.
I don't have any questions with Glenn. I've been, my fingerprints are all over this report, so I'll move backwards, forwards. But what I'd like to do is acknowledge the gentleman in the back there, Stephen Edshaw. He's part of the committee and he's the gentleman who puts that map together that you see. And if you see somebody riding around on a motorcycle or taking notes for where everything is, that's him.
Thank you to everyone on the committee for all the work you're doing, and it's wonderful for this community, and it's, I don't know how long you've been at it, a couple of years?
Over 4 years now.
4 years.
Yeah.
So excellent work. So my concern is that, Rogers is not receiving the subsidized money for the green roads.
Mhm.
And, where I'm really gonna focus on is parts that have not been built by Standard.
Mhm.
So say 4 years ago, if Standard just took a brush, I'm not picking on Standard, if an operator just took a brush and said, I'm gonna build all of Plessis. Right?
Mhm.
And then the subsidy came out, would Rogers have excluded all of Plessis because somebody had proposed to build the whole thing? Now, we all know that wouldn't be realistic for a company to do that because of the geographic size.
Right.
But that's essentially what happened in pockets, is that, oh, we were looking to go there. So then that excluded Rogers. So my question would be, is there a process, or this is something I want, maybe we can take in a meeting with Rogers, a process for identifying areas to qualify for the subsidy
Mhm.
that have not been built, that are in these green areas?
It's a very important question. The background on this is that initially, ISPs were asked where they had infrastructure in the ground. And they were asked by ISED and the provincial government and so forth. ISED is the federal body on this. And so these companies responded. And I don't know how a company like Standard Broadband would have responded. However, the areas, this part of the township showed up as being covered. And it wasn't. They hadn't really even started to put fiber in the ground. And sure enough, the eligible roads are all of the roads that Rogers has then taken and applied for subsidies. So the notion that that there was an exclusion of roads because there were plans or some indication from other ISPs that those roads were already covered or would be imminently covered. That's correct, and that is a huge, from discussions we've had with other groups and other municipalities, that's a huge problem, not just for us, but I think for probably communities right across the country and certainly in Ontario. So it's something that happened. And then, going forward, what's the mechanism to deal with that? Well, I don't know that there really is a mechanism to deal with it. They've talked about it. The county has talked about trying to form an inventory of these sorts of situations so that they can bring it to probably a provincial authority and say, look, we still have problems. I mean, this grant stuff has been great, but there are gaps, and there are gaps as a function of the inaccuracy of the ISED and provincial government data. So, how do we fix that? And I also know that at one point, the provincial government, when their joint fund was introduced between the feds and the provinces that now Rogers is taking advantage of, that they said that they would leave no communities or no roads uncovered. But it was a notion rather than a plan. And so far, we haven't seen, and the counselor can chime in on this, but we haven't seen any indication that there's anything that's gonna, anything formal that will happen, right?
Nothing out there.
No.
Clint's mentioned the county. I really am concerned how the county is doing. I don't think the response we've got previously from the county, I'm looking at the postage wasn't there, and I think we're still on our own getting the service that we need. And I'm really glad that Township's taken an initiative to get our public information. We're trying to get a media event as well. And I think that's all positive, like I think, to try to get the awareness of our residents that, you know, start signing up or start complaining, otherwise you're gonna be left out.
Okay. Yeah, I think we're going in the right direction and we'll do all we can, so.
Yeah, I think I should make a comment that, you know, we've had a frustrating time with the speed of the build outs. And I think that everyone has experienced that, all communities have experienced that, and it was, you know, the classic excuse was the supply chain. And I think there's a lot of validity to that, and I think that things have eased since then. And then there was a labor shortage, which I think is still around, or for specialized skills to do this work. But I think that we're now getting to the point where Standard Broadband is planning to do some stuff here for us in the spring timeframe, and that's kind of their territory currently. And you see my orangey marker on it, that's the stuff that they plan on building out in this winter and spring, weather permitting and so forth. And then there's more yellow greenish shades in here that would be scheduled beyond that point, some of which are actually planned right now to be covered by Rogers, so that those areas might not happen. But we're feeling much better about it now than we were even a few months ago. And the fact that Rogers has come out with, you know, essentially a commitment to build on those red roads and now they're talking about the green ones as well is very good. I think that by the end of this coming year, that we will likely be in a very positive position in terms of coverage for the township. And that's something that we haven't been able to say before. We haven't dared say before in light of the slow speed of rollout. So we're getting there. And you know, we know that Rogers has a lot of work to do, not just locally in the county, but also in the province. And there's a lot of competition for their resources between municipalities. And for us to get a commitment from them, or at least a schedule from them saying that they want to get done by the end of 2024, that's very significant. Because I'm pretty sure, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure that their service level agreement or their funding agreements that they've signed with the province probably call for the completion by 2025. Because that's been the standard for the UBF fund that they draw on. That's 2025 has been the standard at this point. So if they are saying it's going to be done in 2024, that's great.
Okay. That's good.
I just wanted to ask, Councilor Woods, you mentioned the county, and I know that I believe anyway, the county does have a designated person that works on.
Yeah, she was the project manager for the $10 million project to do with agriculture. I think Councilor Hurst will know of her, Daynard.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I guess I was just wondering if it is valuable, if you think it would be valuable to forward even just this report or this resolution to that county, versus just that they're included in the correspondence that's taking place.
I think our CEO might say on that because we discussed that.
Okay.
So through Mr. Chair, I think we are intending to make the county aware of the work that we're doing. I know that they're doing sort of separate work, just so that we can ensure that any of the work that the county is doing doesn't conflict or hinder what the township's trying to achieve. So that's sort of how we were looking to communicate.
Something just came to mind. So the county had funding in place for SWIFT.
Yeah.
And they have 1.6 million that they're not spending.
Yeah.
SWIFT is coming to fruition.
I thought, Mr. Mayor, that was given to knock down the budget.
600,000 was.
Okay.
So the other million, I'm not sure they've assigned it. I didn't agree with this, the 600,000 going to offset the budget. That's still, it's tentative discussion. So I feel a staff should be working with our neighboring all the municipalities in Wellington County, as well as yourself. And people should be penning a letter and sending it to the county and saying, pump the brakes. We have service gaps that are we have identified just in Puss and Shalom of here. And then that money could be used to incentivize, or I say that properly? Companies like Standard, I'm sure there's independent providers up in the northern part of the county to get these build-outs to happen. My goal, and I wasn't, I guess, picking up Standard. My goal is just to ensure that that line is ran in front of everybody's house, so then they at least have the option to connect. Because we all know that if the build-out is done and there's gaps, they're not coming back. The cost is probably too high.
Yeah, that there are real practical reasons why they wouldn't send a crew back in to do that work.
Yeah.
When it's not funded anymore, especially in the current climate, telcos are, we know, you just have to read the paper to understand that they're trying to be as efficient as they can, and they're laying people off, and they're cutting their own internal budgets and so forth. Got Rogers trying to pay for their Shaw purchase and so forth. We think that would be a good idea, especially in light of the fact, your idea is a good idea, especially in light of the fact that we never benefited from SWIFT. We didn't.
That's right.
It was, and they tried to color it that we did, but we didn't. And so there were never any projects that were eligible in the township of Quislinch for SWIFT funding. So it would be a bit of poetic justice to be able to utilize some of that money now to cover these areas. I think that it would be handy for us to understand more of what Rogers is doing and their thinking. But because maybe we could convince them to cover some of these spaces anyway that are going to be gaps. But it would be nice to have our own, county centric mechanism of funding gaps. If the county actually believes that the province is going to come back with their own mechanism sometime in the next 18 months, for instance, I don't think that's going to happen. So it would be nice to be able to take control. I know that the second half or the second portion of that fund that they had allocated, the SWIFT fund that they had allocated, that they were putting back in a reserve. So maybe it's time to at least open that up.
Or at least not spend on something else.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So, I don't know, it's early January, county's having another budget meeting. I'm just like, I don't know if you have the opportunity to query the other CAOs, or sorry, do you know of these service gaps specifically in other municipalities that we could?
We don't know them specifically, but I think we'd all be shocked if they didn't exist. We can see the odd service gap here.
All right, so we just need a letter, one of those whereas ones where we and just speak to the service gaps that we ask the county to not real allot that money to other portions of their budget until the build out, which is supposed to be 2025. So it's not like we're asking them to defer utilizing that money for an infrastructure project for 10 years. It's just pump the brakes for 2 years. And then I can at least take that to the budget discussions. It's first week or second week, Jansen's right there.
So through Mr. Chair, I can make note, because I've made some notes, we've been talking here, not part of the formal minutes, but for staff, when we can work collaboratively with the committee on penning that letter, and I can canvass the CAOs to see if there are service area gaps that they'd be supportive of signing sort of like a joint letter.
I'm sure that 600,000 is gone. It's gonna be a tough, like I was already mentioned, I'm not supportive of moving it, but that one's gonna be a tough one to get back. But if they haven't reassigned that million, do you know? Generally, per kilometer. The subsidy that they're getting or the installation cost?
Yeah, it looks like it's been per household. And I think at one point, that we figured that it was in the realm of like $3,000 or something. Yeah, maybe 3,500.
3,000 into a million goes a long way.
Yeah, but it's, it depends on the close proximity of the homes, like if you got 2 kilometer stretch, you only got 2 homes on it, it's different than having 30 homes on it. So, sort of, you gotta look at the map.
All I was trying to get to was,
Yeah.
is this a drop in the bucket, $1 million, or are we, we really have an
Yeah.
opportunity here to make a difference?
And my personal feeling is that still, I mean, in higher, as John would indicate, I mean, in higher density areas, that 3,500 would go a long way,
Anyways, I think we're on the right track. We could,
It's just be nice to invite this representative from the county maybe to the public information. Now, maybe that's late in the game, but also make sure Councilor Ballmer's invited.
We can invite Council Bulmer. Glenn and I have dealt with her. She put an article in the One Thing Advertiser several months ago that we had to refute because it was very inaccurate from how they depicted West Lynch was being serviced. So
But maybe she needs to come in.
we
Here's the
can,
answer.
I'm just very cautious on someone's coming in and saying, we'll do all this for you, and nothing's done. Right, do you want a motion that, with respect to that, or, Madam CEO, would you like?
I've included some wording, but maybe if I read it, you can tell me if it captures what we're thinking of. I've included it just in the motion that we have related to, that's recommended in the report. So it's that council directs staff to work with the West High Speed Initiative Committee in drafting a letter to the county requesting that the surplus funds from the SWIFT project be used to subsidize servicing deficient areas in the township and deficient areas in the member municipalities within the county of Wellington.
Do we need to mention that that the county does not redirect funds out of the SWIFT funding thing? What I'm trying to get them to do is what I'm trying to say is, don't move this money because it's there already, not just say, hey, we want you to support us on these gaps, because the key is making sure they don't reallot that money somewhere else. I'm trying to find a date for the council meeting.
Perhaps we could tag on something with the funding, existing, with the funding remaining for
The SWIFT funding.
SWIFT funding remaining in the county budget.
I called it the surplus funds from the SWIFT project. You want that reworded?
No, I think that's fine.
That's okay?
Find that date for you. Great. Any other questions? We've read the resolution.
Have a motion and seconder.
Thanks again, great work. Appreciate all the driving around the township. It was much nicer on that paved road with concession 7, wasn't it?
Don't get down there.
All right, all in favor? Great, thanks again. Merry Christmas. You. So we're going to break.
And then break for lunch, yeah.
Gonna break for lunch. Half an hour?
Great, so staff on the call, we're just breaking for lunch for about 30 minutes. We should be back just shortly after 1:30.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We're gonna proceed with item number 9.3.7 on the agenda. Ms. Whitefox?
All right, so through Mr. Chair, I'm going to share my screen and just walk us through the slide deck that accompanies the bylaws. Staff have prepared, I should say, the most recent draft of the site alteration bylaw and the first draft of the, proposed road activity bylaws for council to consider. So just some background, the township's existing site alteration bylaw was put in place in 2012, and there's been a number of amendments over the years. So they're just identified in the slide deck, 3 in 2015. And those were to clarify requirements around public notice, based on the amount of fill. There was a moratorium or a cease in accepting applications that exceed 1,000 cubic meters in 2015. In 2015, we also clarified that cap didn't apply to, applications associated with development agreements or applications, and that was a different cap of 10,000 cubic meters. In 2021, we saw a consolidation and clarification of the various amendments that took place over time. And then in 2022, amending the penalty section and adding the short form wording for ticketing purposes. So the site alteration bylaw has been in front of council a number of times since council directed staff to review it in June 2020. So the collaboration with the township solicitor and our technical consultants resulted in a number of drafts coming to council. So starting in March 2021, with the last draft prior to this being presented to council in January 2022. So as council is aware, the province has initiated a number of amendments to their regulations, starting in and around that time in 2022, which sort of paused the work on this bylaw. We're at a good point now where there's some understanding of what the excess soil regs are in the various amendments to the regulations, where staff and its consultants feel comfortable bringing forward a draft bylaw that incorporates those. So the summary of council comments are in green. So again, this is a very high level summary of all the work that council put into the review of this bylaw from 2020 to 2022. But there was some clarification to the definitions in the bylaw. I would say it goes beyond clarification at this point, and we've replaced and added definitions to the new bylaw in accordance with the OREG. And really, this bylaw is intended to align with the provincial OREGs, at least throughout the majority of the bylaw, with the exception of the permit type. Again, just some more of council's comments from the thorough review that took place. We were looking at considering types of application and permit types based on the size of the project, increasing the project area threshold to 1 hectare in size, really looking at creating scalable securities and scalable application types, looking at public engagement and when we wanted to host public meetings and provide notice to the public, and clarifying requirements related to normal farm practices. So the proposed bylaw has 6 permit types, including normal farm practices, and in general, the permit types are scalable with escalating requirements as the project size grows. Council also wanted us to refine the application and load tracking process to be in line with provincial regs. This bylaw does that. And address the use of liquid soil. So that was sort of a broad concept as we went through the old bylaw. The new regulations do address the use of liquid soil, and as council is aware, there may be more changes to that coming in the new year, and staff will stay on top of those proposed amendments and bring them to council as required. Part of what we're doing in terms of the tracking, and this is in addition to the provincial standards related to their registry and tracking of the movement of fill, the township is proposing the use of its active application mapping tool, which we're currently using for Planning Act applications. It's live on the website. So it would be sort of adding to that tool to include building permits and site alterations, both of which could involve the importation of fill. That would be available to the public. So that's just an example. It's a little hard to see from here. We would use color coding to identify the difference between Planning Act applications, building permits, and site alterations, but you would click on the map and then a little text box would appear that would give more information around what was approved at that location. So separate application types and sort of exemptions or a different permit process for small scale projects was requested by council. So again, looking at scalable projects and sample projects and the documentation required, and reordering the bylaw to include these exemptions near the beginning of the bylaw. So again, the bylaw does propose these various application types. In addition, staff, once the bylaw is approved, will be working on a application form and sort of online portal through Cloud Permit, where the public will be able to go through and it will prompt certain questions that will help determine the type of application that's required based on the scope of work. And again, another comment around consider a renewal process rather than an extension. So again, the bylaw under section 6 has we've expanded this a little bit further to include provisions around abandoned applications, expiry, transfer of permits, revocation of permits, amendments to permits, renewals, and closure of a permit, just capturing sort of as many scenarios as we can and how those would be processed. The development of visuals and user guides. So again, these will be built out once the bylaw is approved. We'll be using Cloud Permit, which is an excellent online tool, as well as the township website. And our newly established building services technician position will really be facilitating the application and process and circulation of these permits. So again, we're still working. It'll be contingent on the bylaw being approved, but we do have a user guide, sort of a flow chart in progress, and then again, our Cloud Permit portal. Pre-consultation. This was also brought up through council's comments, and town staff are proposing that the township's mandatory pre-consultation bylaw be amended in the new year. And we're seeking to add a number of different application types, but one of them being site alteration to that process, making it mandatory. And so the real benefit of pre-consultation is it sets out the requirements of the permit and the application prior to a formal application being submitted. This does expedite the process for both the township and the applicant because it sets out clear expectations. Again, that's fully cost recoverable and the cost is borne by the applicant. And the methodology behind this current version of the bylaw, we are looking at a repeal and replace of the existing bylaw, and that's just based on the scope of changes and in order to incorporate the provincial regulations. The primary goals of this new bylaw are to deter illegal activities, and that will be done through education and awareness, and where required monetary penalties, such as ticketing and doubling permit fees where work is done without a permit. Obtaining compliance without escalating to court proceedings, as those are very costly. Improve transparency in respect to the permitting process and engage with the public as appropriate. So this is outlined through first our mandatory pre-con process, and then also through public engagement, circulation to neighbors, and where appropriate, bringing it to council for approval, as well as our online mapping tool, which aims to increase transparency. And ensuring that the township does not bear the costs associated with alteration activities. So again, this would be through the user fees and collecting actual costs incurred by the township, imposing securities to protect the township infrastructure, our road systems and the environment, and requiring the applicant to cover all third-party costs so that it doesn't become a burden of the municipality. So that's the site alteration bylaw. As we worked through that process, staff did realize that a road activity bylaw would be beneficial to the township. And the purpose of this bylaw is to regulate haul routes for various activities. It's not necessarily just aimed at site alteration, but there could be a number of activities where we would want to have a say in what the haul route is. Limit activities associated with the haul route to specific dates and times. Again, that goes to public nuisance, or sort of seasonal impacts that could occur based on the time of year. Ensure the highways are properly maintained and free from debris. Impose conditions to permits as required, and ensure the township doesn't bear any costs related to infrastructure damage or maintenance of our roads that are a direct result of the road activity. And again, deter illegal activities through education and awareness. And this bylaw does include a penalty section with fines that are double the permit fees. This again is to deter that and to have folks come to the township first before undertaking any work. So bylaw enactment and monitoring. For both bylaws, staff feel that it's prudent to test the bylaw through administration over the period of a year. Track any adjustments or tweaks to the bylaw that might be needed based on actually the administration of the bylaw. So we do want to use it to be able to come up and tell council where we think we can improve. The review and amendment process is reiterative. So again, this is ongoing, just like every other regulatory bylaw. We'll come back with suggestions as needed. And again, staff will continue to monitor changes to provincial regulations. We also have a very knowledgeable set of consultants that help us with this monitoring of the OREGs as well. And our engagement opportunities. So Cloud Permit itself is an engagement opportunity. It's a great tool that we use to have all of our applications be online, which helps facilitate. Folks don't need to wait for the office to be open. They can kind of do it from anywhere. Dedicated township website with visuals and a user guide, social media engagement. We do plan on coming up with a strategy around compliance and encouraging compliance in relation to fill importation. We have our online mapping tool. We have our pre-consultation meetings that will be mandatory come the new year. We have our circulation to the neighbors that may be impacted, our public information meetings, and advising our regulatory agencies of the township bylaw and process. So this would involve notifying the county that we have this in place, the MTO, and our conservation authorities. So this is the timeline that we're looking at. This would be giving the bylaw a separate first, second, and third reading, depending on council's direction and where we land in January. It is also possible to give a second and third reading in January. But this is generally what staff were intending. And happy to answer any questions or take feedback to be incorporated into the next draft.
Okay. Councilor Bailey.
Thank you. I think right off the bat, I want to say thanks to staff for coming up with this really innovative bylaw. I think having the tiered permits is really great to see, because I think that'll help out those in the township that are trying to do sort of smaller landscaping jobs versus a type of a fill operation. So it's great to see those tiered permits. Love the interactive map. I think that's going to be really helpful for residents who just might be observing trucks coming down their road, wondering what's happening. They'll be able to actually go on and just see what's happening, and maybe not bothering staff with a lot of complaints, because that way they can actually see what's going on. I love flow charts, so I love to see the flow chart in there. It's kind of fun. I like the addition of the renewal process. I think that just gives some opportunity to kind of see where's the applicant at in the process. They come and you go through kind of a reassessment, and there's an opportunity maybe for some fees to be collected in that process as well, which will be helpful. And I really like that the pre-consult part's been added in there. I think that will just help everybody with an application. So that's great. One thing I wanted to bring up, it's not a major thing, but just the wording. Currently we've got the term minor, standard, large, and major, and I don't really love the word standard. It kind of suggests that it's something we do regularly, and I don't think site alteration, fill site, that kind of thing is a standard procedure. So I might suggest intermediate or medium. Maybe I'll let staff kind of come up with something that might suit that. I did have a question about the justification for a 3-meter grade height threshold. That's a lot. If you were to stand in front of a pile of dirt, that's, almost 10 feet high in front of you. And I think that maybe I'd like some justification on where that grade height has come from and trying to lower it even down to a half a meter or a meter. So if staff can take that away, that would be great. One thing, it talked about volume of fill, a justification report. I think should include sort of the volume of fill of why a need is needed. If the purpose, whatever the applicant's trying to accomplish, can be done with less, then anything above that would be too much and it should be restricted. So I don't know if we can add kind of the volume of fill to a justification report, but to me, that should be justified. I did have a question about the engaging regulatory agencies. Question for staff, if there was a situation where there was, say, a conservation authority on this similar property, do you have to write up a memorandum of understanding with something like that? Does it have to be sort of a formal, or can it be just through conversation, more casual?
So through you, Mr. Chair, if the proper, and I hope I'm answering the question properly, but if the property was regulated, there are certain permit types that are excluded, so they cannot be considered minor, I don't believe, if it's regulated, because we will be engaging with it. That's regardless of the amount of fill or some of the other criteria. And not simply because the property has been identified as having some sort of environmental feature. And so we would be going through a permit process that's very similar to a building permit process, where a requirement of that, like the site alteration permit, would be approval from the CA. So they would issue their own permit, which would be a requirement of our permit. So it wouldn't necessarily need to be through an agreement, but there would be both regulatory agencies, the township and the CA, that would have a say in where the fill goes, if it needs to be limited in certain areas, and that would be done through site plan and mapping and that sort of thing to distinguish what areas of the property could be involved in the site alteration work.
I see. So in a situation like that, it would be our bylaw that would trump the other agency's permits, or if they have a fill bylaw, it would be ours that would be.
Through you, Mr. Chair, so our bylaw has the enforcement ability in it. So we would be, if our bylaw, the way it's crafted right now, applies to all lands, not just lands that are unregulated. So our bylaw would apply to regulated land, and therefore if work took place that we did not give an approval for, our bylaw could be enforced.
Fantastic. Okay. I didn't, that was the question. I just wasn't asking it well. I think I'll leave it at that. I'm looking forward to seeing kind of what our next draft will look like, but well done.
Okay, Councilor Hurst?
Thanks. Yeah, I appreciate staff bringing this forward, and generally speaking, I'm supportive of the amendments to the bylaw moving forward. I do have a couple, maybe just like more technical questions of staff, if you can indulge me. I guess the first one, just around transparency of active permits. Maybe, did I understand it right that an individual within the public would be able to access township cloud permit mapping software and see visually on a map of the township existing permits? Am I understanding that right, Courtney?
So through Mr. Chair, everything except for it exists on our website, not through Cloud Permit.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay. So I think that's quite a novel thing in terms of just transparency, to show here's where they are, and just to kind of follow up with Councilor Bailey's comments, like if you are a concerned member of the public and you see a truck going by, you know what's permitted and what's not permitted. So I think that's important. I guess the one other question would be is there any desire to consult the public through a information gathering process around the proposed bylaw? I understand that it's going to come up in subsequent meetings, and my sensitivity would be, you know, this can be a touchy point within the municipality. And, illegal soil dumping is certainly a lightning rod, and I'm just curious if there's any thoughts or ideas around how we can share the concept of an updated bylaw with the public beyond maybe just listening to council meeting proceedings prior to it working its way through the process.
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think staff have a few ideas, in addition to what was summarized in the slide deck. There is the ability to utilize our Engage Plus Lynch website. We can open up a survey. Now that survey could be open for a period of time. It doesn't necessarily have to be contingent on when the bylaw is passed. It could stay open beyond that. We could collect feedback sort of over a longer period of time, even when the bylaw is in place. We also have the option to host an information session in person. That could also take place once the bylaw has been passed and could serve as more of an education tool, at which we could also collect feedback. But again, I think for staff, our perspective is that on paper, the bylaw looks a certain way, and we need to be able to test that to find out if that is actually how it's going to be administered. And so I think a lot of the feedback that we will get will be as we use the bylaw and we circulate to neighbors and we receive sort of that feedback through the permitting process.
And I'm supportive of all those. I think this is an opportunity to just engage through engagement. The forums, I think, is good. Maybe just the last question and answer it as best you can. I'm curious, you can share within your peer group of municipal executives, can you share with us, is this a similar path that other municipalities are going through? And I guess I say that with a filter of, we're relatively close to the GTA, the 401 goes right through our municipality. So obviously excess soil or illegal excess soil dumping, something that's, certainly an issue that we've encountered and are looking to remedy it. Can you maybe share strategies other municipalities are taking? Are they similar to the one we're going through or different?
So through you, Mr. Chair, I think that there is an movement towards updating these bylaws in general because of the changes that the province has made. I think that we are probably in the first 10%, I would say, of municipalities that are tackling this at this stage, but it is something that a number of municipalities are working on, and the township did utilize those sample bylaws in the drafts of where other folks are at, in particular looking towards the east of Ontario, towards municipalities that are in close proximity to the GTA. So it's not necessarily novel, but I do think we're in sort of the first group that are trying to tackle this.
Yeah, I think it's not necessarily bad that we're in the front end of this. I think it's just where there's opportunities to learn, we take advantage of them. But, yeah, that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you. Good questions by both Councillor Bailey and Councillor Hurst. I have two questions that are relating more to the smaller scale site alteration permit application specifically, and also one for the road activity bylaw. I don't know if you want to deal with that one separately, but so just in terms of, so I like that there's now sort of this sliding scale, the minor, standard, large and major, or intermediate or whatever. I'm supportive of changing that. In terms of the permit application, all four of those indicate that a control plan must be completed, or aspects of the control plan. And just looking at the list that's required in a control plan, it's pretty extensive and probably costly and time consuming to go through it. And for sure, I know that there's many situations where all of those things are 100% necessary. But on some of the sort of smaller scale things, will that be dealt with as part of the mandatory pre-consultation, whether all of these things will be required or just bits and pieces, just set clear expectations in advance?
Through you, Mr. Chair, absolutely. I would say that is definitely the intent of the pre-consultation.
That's good. And then my second question is in regards to the exception waivers. And the bylaw, it talks about an exception waiver when the area does not exceed 20 cubic meters. And then it further goes on to say that there's no cost to get that waiver. However, the owner is responsible for any third-party costs. And I'm just wondering, for something that is as small scale as something under 20 cubic meters, would it be likely that there would be third-party costs added to something like that?
So through you, Mr. Chair, likely not. There likely wouldn't be. But I think what the township wants to ensure is that if there was something very, very site specific that did require, we do want the ability.
Okay. And I'm only asking those questions because, I mean, I think we all want to see people, encouraging people to follow the protocol. But just with, you know, human nature is, if it's gonna add costs and unnecessary time, they're not gonna do it. So I just wanted to kind of clarify that. And then my other question is in regards to the road activity bylaw. Should I ask that now or do you want to do that separate? It talks about, it talks about in the bylaw, activities that are exempt from site alteration are also exempt from road activity bylaw. But it doesn't talk to you about if there's a waiver, if that is also exempt from the road activity bylaw. Is that the intent?
So through you, Mr. Chair, and through the council questions that we received, staff had proposed adding some wording around exempting a haul route permit where there was a waiver.
Okay.
And that would be at the discretion of staff, just again, in those sort of one-off scenarios where maybe there is something required, but in general, yeah.
Okay, sorry, I missed that. I must have missed that question. That's perfect. That's the answer I was looking for.
Councilor Spose?
Yeah, I understand that the salt alteration, bylaw kicks in at 20 cubic meters or 2 truckloads. But I'm looking at, 90% of us want to get a bag of soil to put on the gardens. They're like these, big, square, containers of, loam type of thing. If I read this bylaw, I gotta phone up and ask for a waiver. Is that really necessary for something that's as mundane as that? Like it's, I'll tell you, if you make it too complex for these small people, they're gonna ignore it.
So through Mr. Chair, this can be at the direction of council, staff's thought process, excuse me, with the waiver exemptions. Oftentimes our bylaw officer is called to a site where they're, you know, perhaps the resident sees a few trucks, but they're not sure how many, and sometimes it can be reported to us that there's a number of trucks going in and some type of activity going on. Sometimes that's on a weekend or after hours, so we will be sending in our officer to do that site inspection to verify, okay, it was perhaps just a landscaping project and not quite what was described through the complaint. The point of the waiver, and if we are able to educate our residents to let the township know when you're doing site works, if it's 1 or 2 trucks, you know, maybe your neighbors are calling because they don't know what's going on. It sort of alleviates that resource from the township for sending someone out. If we don't get the call, we're not coming out for that. So it's really if there's something that's going on that is concerning the neighbor that we would get the call. So I think encouraging sort of that communication to the township through this waiver process is helpful. I understand what you're saying. We may not get a lot of those calls to us, and that's sort of probably to be expected.
I think you mentioned the key word, truckloads. And the person brings in 10 bags of soil type of thing from Canadian Tire type of thing. You read this literally, he's got to apply for a waiver.
Right, and so I would focus on, I think we've identified it as 20 cubic meters or less, which would be 2 truckloads or less. So I would say if you're hauling soil in bags in the back of your vehicle or in a trailer, you're probably not going to alert neighbors or alert any concern. But if there are trucks coming and dumping on your property, you may want to let the township know. Because
What if we can make that clear type of thing, you know, if you- something along the lines of, you know, let's transport in your personal vehicle, bags or something like that. Because the common person needs to say, well, I'm not gonna do that, I'm gonna buy 2 bags, I'm not gonna ask for waivers, it's nuts, you know, so. Just wonder if we can clarify that a bit.
So through Mr. Chair, rather than doing it in the bylaw, because I think what staff are trying not to do is create loopholes.
Sure.
We can build out, frequently asked questions, sort of
Sure,
things on the
okay.
website for that.
Sure, okay, that makes sense, yeah, I totally with that. Let's go to the other end of the spectrum, it's farm operations. If you've got, in the fall, you got farmers bringing in, these, triaxle truckloads of manure, and they got heavy equipment spreading the, manure. The way I read this bylaw, they gotta apply for a waiver, and I don't think that's, appropriate, given it's, a normal farm practice.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we added a normal farm practice section in this bylaw, and that was based on the township's experience with, violations in the township, and normal farm practices being used as sort of a loophole to import fill. So I think, this bylaw does not intend to interfere with a bona fide farm practice.
So can you put that in the Q and A type of thing up front?
Yep.
Oh, that'd be great. Next question. I didn't see it in here, maybe you got it in here, but you know, we got agricultural class 1 and 2 lands are strictly for farming. And I can't see any reason why somebody would wanna put fill on top of land that's already agricultural class 1 and 2. Wondering if there's a need to say a restriction or something like that, unless it's cultivating a field or something like that. Well,
I need to report back on the second draft on that one.
So through you, Mr. Chair, that's going to be something that we do see. We can report back. I do want to caution that, the purpose of the bylaw is to regulate the activities. The activities are occurring regardless.
I agree with you, I'm just wondering, there should be a hard stop on agricultural class 1 and 2 lands, period.
Is there not a way that, cause there was that one, better farm practice, called tribunal hearing, about the mono mills. And from my understanding is that, they ruled it not better farm practice because soil being brought in didn't meet the requirements to improve the soil quality within the, respective farm. I wonder if staff could say in the bylaw that, you know, the owner has to demonstrate that this will be an improvement to the soil for better yield, or maybe like ask Councilor Hurst to.
Sure, I'll ask Councilor Hurst,
See a little better.
comment on my suggestion.
Yeah, I'm happy to come back in the next round of edits, add some hopefully practical context to it. I'm happy to do that.
I think that would be easier, is that, you know, we have to justify the improvement to the soil versus just being a.
Yeah,
You
no,
don't
no,
cover
no,
up
yeah,
the
that-
soil,
yeah,
but you're
that's-
out.
I agree with you, that helps, yeah. I can, look at that, that's certainly a good idea.
Height comes in.
And, yeah, the issue with respect to public meeting or, let's engage. When would you suggest having that engaged person sort of, elements, sort of between the second and third?
With you, Mr. Chair, I think staff would need probably in the new year some time to draft the survey questions, so likely January to February, and we can leave it open for as long as we need to, but likely we won't get it live until January.
Okay, I just want to make sure there's any relevant input that's in time, it's incorporated in time for the third meeting, and I do understand that getting this through is of the essence as there are pending, applications. Okay, and the last thing is, just, for everybody to know, gravel pits. Are they exempt or not exempt from this one?
This bylaw does not regulate, property that's in the area list.
Thank you.
Right, I feel that you should take a look at, putting in a piece that permits staff to either defer, or deny an application if there's already an application, open fill operation on a certain segment of road, or, because what I envision is similar to the building department, is once you receive an application, staff have to deal with it, and if they meet up, check all the check boxes, away you go. But if there's already an operation with a haul route, and then what, if we have degradation, I butchered that, of the road, you could go to the first applicant and say, oh, well, you wrecked the road, and then the first applicant would go to the second applicant and say, no, they wrecked the road, then we have this argument of who wrecked the road and how do we collect it, so. Again, I don't think it has to be a hard line in there, but I just wanna give staff the flexibility to say, oh, it's gonna be a small second operation, yes, or if it's two large operations, no. And defer them, or put a delay on the start of their operation. A few more options to staff, I think is good, because then it will also help with the public. If there's a lot of tricycles hauling on the road or whatever it may be.
So through Mr. Chair, both the road activity and the site alteration bylaw have, set timeframes that have to be built in by staff. So, whatever the project timeline is, and then we'll be looking for days and time, likewise for a haul route. So there is some authority built in there for staff to say, you know, that haul route won't be appropriate during these time periods because we already have too much truck traffic on the road. So there already is that sort of, built-in flexibility for staff in both bylaws, given that we have to approve timeline and impose conditions.
Okay. All right, anything further? Did you want to read what you captured, or are you just going to just go away with it? We're gonna see the second reading next meeting.
Mr. I just wanted to compliment staff on this thing, and you got to say so. It's a very good, well done document. It certainly heads over heels of what we had before.
Maybe I wasn't finished yet, maybe I was late.
I forgot to do.
Oh, I thought you said I forgot.
No, I forgot.
Oh, I thought you.
I would never.
Is that how you heard it?
No, I heard,
Oh,
You never assumed it.
Now you have your turn.
great job, staff. No, there's been a lot of effort put into this, and, you know, we've changed direction over the course of the last year or two, but it's a real world experience, and it's a problem that we're trying to solve, and I think this is going to help, so.
Just was, if we have a few other comments, are we okay to just email them just for consideration? Or to
Yeah,
clarify for later?
But they should be included on the council, comments for the next round.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, so I've captured the comments today, and then if anything else comes in through, email, we can incorporate those too into the next report. Great, thank you.
So do you have resolutions?
I do, and I'm not including the comments, if that's fine with council, I have. That report ADM 2023-079, first reading of proposed site operation bylaw and road activity bylaw be received, and the council give a first reading to bylaw 2023-057, being a bylaw to prohibit and regulate the alteration of property and movement of bill within the township, and bylaw 2023-058, being a bylaw to regulate road activity within the township of Cliff. And the council direct staff to incorporate the noted revisions into the next draft to be presented to council at the January 10th, 2024.
I have one other comment. The road activity bylaw, is it possible to request delegated authority from the county or expand our authority, or our, even Jacobs or the designated person who enforced that bylaw? What I'm trying to get at is, we're gonna receive the calls for the mud on 34 because of a house that we issued a building permit for. But we're not gonna have the authority to enforce our bylaw. So have you ever heard of that, or can you at least look into that to see if we can work with the county and see if they give us authority to or adopt our bylaws would be another way to do it.
Staff can look into that and report back. I just also want to be cognizant of taking on that with one bylaw officer,
I know, but we have. Okay. but-
right? We did contact the ministry and the county in terms of wanting to be a part of our permitting process, and they certainly will be commenting on permits that involve their road network. But in terms of enforcing on their roads, we'll report back.
Well, or at least once we get the final draft, attempt to get, send it to the county for adoption. They penned one, a year or two ago, and it was somewhat vague or simple. So maybe if we can get them to adopt similar standards, then when there's a complaint, we can call them and they can enforce it themselves, but similar to ATV bylaw and sign bylaw, we try to have them similar so that public cover. You understand what's expected.
Can the OPP enforce? A whole bylaw? Oh.
So through Mr. Chair, the OPP would enforce anything related to the Highway Traffic Act. So there is enforceable provisions around like debris on the road and things like that. I would say it's probably not a top priority. So it's good that the township has the ability to ticket and retain security for that.
Let's try to get the county to mirror ours. Okay. You read it? Did we get a mover? Yeah, Councilor Bailey and second by Councilor Goya.
Yeah.
All right, any last comments? All in favor? That's carried. The next, we have 9.3.8. Are you ready? And I believe that's Laura's report.
Yeah, so through Mr. Mayor, this is the annual communications and engagement report. A couple of the highlights would be the Facebook and the Engage Plus Lynch. So our Facebook platform grew by 123% this past year. And staff believe a lot of that is due to boosting certain Facebook posts. So those paid advertisements on Facebook that are kind of directly reached to the Plus Lynch area. And then for Engage Plus Lynch, there was 6 surveys done this year on the platform. And when looking at the surveys that are put out annually, like the user fees and charges, there was a year-over-year increase in the visitors and submissions for that survey, which kind of highlights the increase in engagement that can be seen on that platform.
Any resolution?
The report ADM 2023 -080 entitled Annual Township Communications Report, be received for information.
Move for that, Councilor Spillis, second by Councilor Hurst. Comments or questions for, please ask her some. Councilor Bailey, that one?
No, not a question, but I just think it's really great to see how the Plus Lynch Fire and Rescue Services page has grown. I mean, their top priority is public engagement, and that's, and I know Jessica's been doing a lot of work there, so it kind of goes to show that, we're getting some response and hopefully some fire prevention happening. So that's really neat.
Mr. Spillis?
Yeah, with respect to Twitter, we heard that Elon Musk wants us to start charging this and all that sort of thing. Are we on a subscription basis now, or is it still on the old version?
Through Mr. Chair, no, it's not a subscription basis at all. We don't pay. However, we did see a decrease since like August on in the people who are subscribing via X. And we wonder if that's why. Like we saw, there's a lot more people subscribing from January through July than there has been from August to November. Maybe that's why.
Thank you.
Okay. All in favor? Carried. Thank you, Laura. What's up next? Oh. Compliance assessment reports?
Yeah.
You have a resolution, please? Thanks, Laura.
Yeah.
So staff have taken some liberty in drafting a motion to defer these items until a meeting in the new year, just given the scope of review that's required. So it's the draft motion is that correspondence item 10.2 regarding the various aggregate compliance assessment reports be received, and that council defer considering the compliance assessment reports to a special meeting to be held in January 2024.
Now, if we go ahead with that, it'll be posted as an agenda, obviously. And then we can submit our questions ahead of time, they'll be captured and we can review them, because I have some concerns that may require legal advice, there's some around just like interpretation, so when would you want to receive those if we do this?
So we do have a public meeting on January 17th in the evening for budget, so we could sort of do a meeting maybe before that. It doesn't need to be in the morning, it could be directly before that. We could also, based on the questions coming in from council, we could determine whether we would like to have a part of that in closed session if it does require any solicitor input.
So council, are you comfortable with deferring this item? I feel we need to do a deep dive into these because of some concerns that have been raised from our consultants about site plan compliance, and then these compliance reports still indicate they're in compliance, which I feel is contrary to what our consultants are saying. So I'd like to highlight those irregularities, and then staff can bring the appropriate professionals to a meeting. Now, the 17th is one we could do a couple. I would prefer, say, 5 o'clock and work on this till 7, then the public meeting. Or a separate meeting, maybe the 16th. I was just trying to keep it on the same day for us that have children and other obligations. So first off, council, are you comfortable with deferring these, and we'll all take a deep dive into them and send our comments to Courtney and do a separate meeting? All right, yeah.
Just a question. You mentioned, I think, Mr. Mayor, in our last meeting about the Auditor General report on the management of aggregate resources. And I wonder if that report could also maybe come into this agenda, since it's a very similar conversation.
Yeah.
Having. I don't know if that was gonna show up on a agenda or not.
Councilor Spillis asked me if I had intended to ask Pete on the agenda, and my response to him was, I've been dealing with it at the TAML level, and we're gonna discuss it at TAML January 4th. And then I kind of left it there with Councilor Spillis. Part of my thinking was, and so the way I see it going down on the 4th is the executive TAML is gonna meet, we're going to ask consultant to, there's 18 or 19 recommendations. A consultant's gonna build a work plan for TAML for the next year or 2 years, but also build a work plan for that report and say, here's the top 5 that are eminent, we need to get, pressure on these and actions, and then, let's say the bottom 15. So that's gonna take some time. I doubt I'll have that for the 17th, but that doesn't mean I think we should take some action ahead of the 17th, but I hope that TAPMO review will bring some value to this council too. So we'll probably revisit it a second time. I don't know, maybe what are your guys' thoughts?
We add it to the agenda on the 17th, and even if it's just a status update, that's probably good.
Yeah.
And then add it at a future date if warranted, because I think it's a substantial report that gives a lot of good ammunition to address some challenges we have as a sector. That'd be my take on it.
And I think we should be, because that report that should drive some of our email delegations outside of town, we should be saying, here's our examples of compliance concerns, boom, boom, boom. And we need the ministry to adopt these recommendations. I'm supportive of that as well. That's great. That's good. You're out.
Yeah, I'm good with that. That's a good idea. I'll just have a sort of our status and then we can move from there.
Okay.
I can talk offline. I was just wondering if staff have a way of tracking. I mean, I've kind of created my own Excel spreadsheet with all the different, is there a way we can be sort of compiling this? I mean, we're gonna see these sort of year after year after year, be able to see what changes are happening, or they were out of compliance and now they are, check, move on. Is there a way to, I don't know, organize it and track it? Like scrolling through, looking for a little check mark and then reading, it's very
Tedious.
A little cumbersome, tedious. I don't know how to.
So through you, Mr. Chair, we don't have a mechanism for tracking these. They're not laid out and we send it out in any sort of easy way to navigate quickly. We do keep our files, so we have the licenses and then we have the compliance assessment reports dating back for over 10 years or so related to each pit. We don't have a tracking database in terms of like one year to the next.
Another thought. Is there any value in building a relationship, starting a relationship building with the Guelph Inspection Enforcement Office? First off, I wanna know, I just wanna see them, because they're the ones that are coming into our community and checking these operators. But is there any value in sending these reports to them or a simple query, and I want it in writing? Do you have any non-compliance orders or issues within the township? And if the answer is no, then, I mean, that's okay, but if it's yes, and then the corresponding compliance report we receive doesn't indicate that, we have a problem. So kind of twofold there, but I'd like to build that relationship because we're seeing compliance concerns, and along with the Auditor General's report about not a lot of inspections going on, we can say to them, see this report, not necessarily today or next meeting, but, do you have plans to implement more inspections and, from that kind of thing?
So through Mr. Chair, we can certainly, we do interact with a number of officials from the Guelph office. I don't know how much of that enforcement information is confidential. They may not share with us.
Well,
We can
I
find
agree.
that out.
I agree, and I think we dealt with the OPP on the deputy, and they tell you what they can. They use generalities, and I'm not asking a specific license or a specific location, but I want to maybe hear, yeah, we were out 6 times last year, 12 times this year. We found 5 minor things. We found 0 major. So unfortunately, if they played it's all confidential, I would maybe argue back that there's a way to present the information that doesn't jeopardize that confidentiality. Does that make sense?
We can reach out and we can see if we can arrange something like that with the Guelph office, yeah.
Okay. So anyways, sorry.
Sorry, you just brought up an interesting point. I mean, when we're talking about compliance, you have minor compliance issues, major compliance issues. What is that? What's a minor? Like, if there's no, fence delegation, to me, I'm like,
Scrap is in
Okay.
the wrong spot.
yeah,
That's
there's,
a minor.
so,
I think.
I don't know. I guess I don't have an understanding of what major and minor, would
Well-
look like, and then what to spend our efforts on.
Maybe that's the first meeting we meet with them, is they can come and use that as an education piece and explain.
Perfect.
How an inspection happens, what's a major, what's a minor. That would be excellent to have.
Yeah.
Anyways, we'll leave it with you, there's,
Go on some tours.
yeah. They might take a hole, put me in it, and I never come out. Be going for a whole pit. You,
Meanwhile, special for Ron Stoll, he's done the Arkell ones. Just went off on the Arkell.
his perspective on what's major and minor, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't care who they sort. Well, I kind of want to hear it from the people that represent the ministry,
Okay. At the same time, we got,
or both.
Yeah.
I want their opinion too.
Did you want that as part of the resolution or just a takeaway?
Just a takeaway. But I definitely want to start building a relationship, so I'd hate to bring somebody in here and just berate them and look at all the problems we have here and I want to start somewhere, so hey, yeah, I do, but you guys don't. Do that, so.
If I could, I maybe view that as similar to the truck inspection type of report that the OPP shared.
Yeah.
It's collaborative in nature. It's part of their remit to do that, but it has benefits to our community, and we'd like to hear about that, and how do we support them doing the best job they can, like that kind of stuff. So I'd be very supportive of the delegation and an annual reporting mechanism, whatever that looks like. If they're willing to do that without causing a great deal of work, I think would be greatly valued.
Then these compliance report, we should almost deal with separately every year. But see how this batch goes. Good,
You want me- Yep.
there's mine. And most of those takeaways,
Yes, so I have that we received, we're receiving the, CARS reports and deferring them to a special meeting to be held on January 17th, 2024.
well, we didn't decide that yet.
Okay,
Well, I didn't-
that's okay, if we're thinking,
What do you guys wanna do? Do you wanna come in and say, well, it all depends on who we want to meet to? Or, oh, my questions need to be answered by a lawyer. Please. We're looking at 5, give us 2 hours, then the public meeting at 7. Or another option was, the 16th, the day before. Staff and myself have meetings at 1. They have Heritage, they have the HR of the county. We could do in the morning, but I'd rather do it on the public day. What are your thoughts?
I prefer the public meeting day.
Give them the 5 to 7.
I have a conflict, but I also have a conflict on this.
You do that with all the email. If you didn't have a conflict of interest on the report, then I would advocate a change. All right, so the 17th,
at 5 P.M.
I'll make sure it's, so no. Sarah will be coming.
Yes, and then I also added that the Auditor General report regarding aggregate resources included on the January 17th agenda for consideration, not the essentially,
When's our next council meeting?
January 10th.
We put on the 10th. Unless you deem the 10th is very, very busy,
We're okay.
put on the 10th, because time will be done before.
Okay.
That gives us the 2 hours for the compliance and be part of the Auditor General scheme. Okay.
We just need a mover and seconder.
Council Bailey's got her finger up.
Sure.
And Council Willis, any last comments? Just remember to send them in to Courtney so she can include them on the agenda when it goes in. All in favor? You're not in?
If you want to mention that they're all in their drive now, all the site plans.
You can, sure.
So we have, staff have included in your share folder, the various, most up to date, as far as we know, from the ministry, site plans for each of the pits. So they're in there for council to review as you're looking through the carnival.
If we notice in the compliance reports that they received amendments for things, I guess, we should highlight those and you can get those amendments, or are they just a change on the, like, it won't, it's just a line on the new site plan? Like,
We can, if we're noticing sort of those discrepancies or things that we have questions about, we can make note and we can send to the ministry and ask.
so I'll give an example. One of them was, a site plan amendment to allow the removal of the common boundary, right? But, and that was granted, but I don't know if there was hydro G studies to support that change, or, so these are all the things we should send to you for that meeting, right?
Correct, and again, if they were deemed to be minor, we wouldn't know what was included in that justification to the ministry, because we won't be party to that information.
All right, I have some more. Okay.
But yeah, no. No, there were places that said, or there were some in there that had extension requested, but we don't know.
Yeah.
Where they're at with that.
And I think
Right.
if you could, if you don't already have it, find out from the enforcement officer, someone, what, do they have a list of what's minor and what's
We have that.
Can you send that to council ahead of, it'll help me.
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, whether that's applied consistently. But we do have a document that was provided us by the ministry
How old is it?
within the last year and a half.
Right, perfect. Love to see it. I know I can see it. Okay. That's done. What are we doing? Finance reports, MTO. Those are, Mr. Bryson, you have a resolution, I'll get you the resolution, so it's on the table here. 10.3.
Yes, that correspondence item 10.3 regarding MTO's response to council September 27, 2023 resolution 2023-030 we received for information.
All right, you move, please, Councilor Hurst, second by Councilor Spillis, questions or comments? No, okay, all in favor? It's carried. Okay, 10.4.
The correspondence item 10.4 regarding Blue Triton's response to council's September 27, 2023 council resolution be received for information.
Gonna move that, Councilor Spillis, and then Councilor Goya, questions or comments around that one?
This question, staff, this is a sort of a hard thing to swallow all the time, that they keep mentioning that they don't need to respond to level 1 and level 2 water alerts. We all religiously do that, being homeowners and property owners. And do you know if there's any move afoot to try to get this water taker and other similar water takers to start a petition the process to get these adhere to this alert levels?
So we did reach out to Hardin just to with Blue Triton's response, and they did provide a response to staff on this. And so I'll just sort of paraphrase what Hardin has provided. So that sort of just recalling that the township did make suggestions to the MECP during the review of the permit to take water that was issued in 2021 and it expires in 2026. It was made clear in our comments to that permit to take water that all water users should reduce consumption by 10% level 1 and 20% level 2, based on the 3 months usage, previous 3 months usage. And so again, Hardin is assuming that the MECP considered this request, but this condition was not included in their permit. He also notes there's a special clause in Blue Triton's permit to take water that requires Blue Triton to do more monitoring during low water level declarations, which is a progressive step. And at this point, Hardin's opinion is it may not be necessary to pursue other actions, but they are hoping for a broader conversation with all water takers, including the region of Waterloo, City of Guelph, and other large permit takers in the township for safeguarding base flow to Mill Creek on a more permanent way. And he also notes that Kyle Davis is aware of this desire and hopeful that it will happen at a future date.
It's good to hear that at least the cognizant as well.
And sorry, through Mr. Chair, we did meet with Blue Triton. Hardin was involved in that meeting. We were talking a little bit about the recommendations from their report from the September 27th meeting, but I believe Blue Triton did make some notes within their response to us that they did take some action in their operations plant over the summer when low water level triggers, when they did become aware. So that was expressed in the meeting that Blue Triton does do that and other water takers may not do the same. So I do believe they included that in their response for council. They felt it was important to make council aware of that.
Right, then you were second, all in favor? Carried. All right, 10.5, you have a resolution for that, please?
The correspondence item 10.5 regarding the notice of study commencement for Highway 401 from Steeles Avenue in Milton to 1.5 kilometers west of the Halton Wellington boundary. Be received for information.
And move it back, please. Councilor Lewis, Councilor Bailey. Any questions or comments?
Yeah, where will the fill go?
You know, all the grind, all the regrind.
On your properties next door.
Where, I'm trying to find the actual boundary. Do
Yeah.
you know where the municipal boundary is and where the Wellington sign is?
It's Darkwood. I think it's near Darkwood.
It's down in the corner, right?
Yeah, near me.
So is
It's right
Is
there.
is Watson 1.5 kilometers from that? Watson interchange, are they looking to redo the Watson interchange?
I think it's
Before that.
That's 3 kilometers, yeah, it's about halfway.
It's first line. Isn't it?
That's right, the
Past
first
first
line.
line.
This first line, the,
Well, have a look at this.
There's a map in the note.
It's not labeled very well. Even I know.
And I'm just trying to see if they're gonna be considering changes to the layout of the interchanges in Portsmouth or not. I guess that's a little premature.
I don't think they're gonna go that far based on the
No. Okay. All right, we can leave it for now, but when they start to do this section in Portsmouth, there's conversation around
Interchange.
a new interchange, right, at Watson.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're good, I'm good.
But it makes sense.
Even for emergency access.
Yeah.
But, okay, so I can move for that.
Yes, you have your section.
All right, all in favor? It's carried. Please, sir, where you got a resolution for that, please?
Yes, it's correspondence item 10.6 regarding the October 2023 County of Wellington OPP Food Services Board report. You will see for information.
Gonna move for that, please. Close, and we come to Hearth, any questions or comments?
I just wondered why we were seeing this on this agenda when it was on our last agenda's delegation.
I think he does it every month or every 2 months.
Is this not the same one?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, so the report that council received previously was their annual report, and council had requested to receive the monthly reports going forward. So
It
this
happens
is
to be the
first
same.
monthly report.
It's the same thing, okay. Or it's part of it.
So just, is it the intention that we would just get the monthly report as part of correspondence in the meeting notes?
Through you, Mr. Chair, yes, that's correct.
Why not? It's a consent agenda, but. it doesn't. Okay. Any other questions? Tom? Okay, all in favor?
It's just good to see it.
Carried. Council reports. Then we get to this, the brain is mush.
You don't want this.
Merry Christmas, Happy New Year. Everybody's got a couple of one, this today, Wednesday. 2 days left and some days off. I don't think I've had any meetings. Was in communication with Ted Arnett's office, I believe I mentioned that, the new Minister of Transport was supposed to have a meeting, but fruition yet. No, I don't think we have anything else to mention. Oh, the parade, we did the Santa Claus parade. Walked in that, it's gonna help collect the food for the food bank, which there was a lot of people donating, which was nice. Good weather, great turnout of people, saw most council there, if not all. And I guess that's it. Anything from council updates?
No, Glen making snow.
Are we making ice?
We are making
I
ice.
heard the compressors on basketball line, heard them running.
Carter was
Was he?
flooding it last night, no?
No. No. Okay, so mover and secretary to receive that wonderful report, Councilor Willis, Councilor Harris, all in favor? All right, bylaws, Ms. Whitmores.
All right, so we have 2 resolutions here for bylaws. One is to give a first reading. So that the following bylaws be given a first reading in open council, bylaw 2023-057, being a bylaw to prohibit and regulate the alteration of property and movement of fill. within the township. And bylaw 2023-058 being the bylaw to regulate road activity within the township.
All right, thank you for that, Councilor Bailey, Councilor Willis, all in favor, that's carried.
And then the following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 2023-053 to authorize entering into a private well interference complaint resolution agreement with Triton Water Canada Holdings Incorporated. And bylaw 2023-060, a bylaw to appoint a fire chief and repeal bylaw 2022-060.
All right, we move for that. Councilor Curtis, Councilor Willis, all in favor? Carried. Any announcements? Business arising from the closed session. What's the motion? Any business? Confirmatory bylaw, please.
That the following bylaw be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council. Bylaw 2023-059 being the bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council for the corporation of the township of Plymouth at its meeting held on the 20th day of December 2023.
Mover, Phyllis, Bailey, all in favor? Carried, then adjourned.
Council hereby adjourns at 2:55 p.m.
Councilor First, Councilor Guida, all in favor. Good job, everyone. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year if I don't see you.